Hello, welcome everybody. This is a regular meeting of the Board of Trustees of the Village of Wilmette. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Again, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. We have a big crowd and I'm sure some more people will be trickling in. There are copies of the agenda on the table by the door. However, we are going to reorder the agenda tonight. So just so everybody here knows, we will, after our consent agenda and reports of officers, we will start with the bus ordinance that's on the agenda, followed by the mural in Veterans Park, then a presentation of the fiscal 2023 year-end financial report, and finally to the Municipal Services Standing Committee report for our road and alley program. Okay. Can you not hear me? Oh. I hear the microphone well. Is any, you can, okay, you guys can hear me? Okay, I'll just make sure I speak into it. If you plan to address us tonight, we ask that you please come up to the podium, please speak into the microphone and tell us who you are and where you live, as that may be relevant to the matter at hand. Everything you say and everything we say is recorded, and from those recordings, minutes of the meeting are prepared. These minutes are available at Village Hall and on our website at wilmette.com. Also, our village board meetings are televised on Local Access Channel 6 and on the internet. By televising our meetings, we make it easy for our neighbors in the community to follow the proceedings of the village board, see the types of matters that come before us, the questions we ask, and the policies we create. You can find archived videos of village board and other local government meetings at wilmette.gov. We changed the website, but you can access it from the old one. Thank you to all the residents who tune in regularly to Channel 6 and pay attention to the workings of their village government. Before each meeting, the board receives a packet of agenda materials. These materials are also posted on wilmette.gov on the Friday before our meeting, so residents and other interested parties can review the same materials that the board members receive. Finally, we are a community of neighbors, and as such, we want our meetings to be as civil, as courteous as possible. I know that we, the board, as well as our residents and those speaking, will promote civility by listening, being respectful of others, acknowledging that we are all striving to support and improve our community, and understanding that we may each have different ideas for achieving that objective. As one courtesy to those around you, please take this time to turn off your cell phones and other devices. And while we're doing that, would the clerk please call the roll?
Trustee Dodd.
Here.
Trustee Shepard.
Here.
Trustee Smith.
Here.
Trustee Leonard.
Here.
Trustee Jaya is absent, and Trustee Kennedy.
Here.
And President Plunkett.
Here. We have a quorum. The next item on our agenda is item 2, public comment. During public comment, individuals are allotted up to 3 minutes to address the board on an item which is not already on the agenda. Members of the audience may address the board on matters which are on tonight's agenda when the particular matter is called. And just as a reminder, the bus ordinance and the mural discussion is on tonight's agenda, and so we will have public comment when those matters are called. Would anyone in the audience like to address the board on a matter that is not already on tonight's agenda? You can raise your hand. Okay. Oh, I have one. Yes? Good evening, Mr. Weiermuller, and I believe I said this, but everyone has 3 minutes to make a public comment.
Okay. Yeah, I always start my clock because I'm very conscientious of the 3 minutes. Mark Weiermuller, Wilmette resident. Yeah, I see some of the items I was going to mention are already on the, that there's going to be public comment later on. We are following a lot of this stuff on Wilmette Connection, a Facebook page. Hopefully you guys are all following that. We promote commerce, events, and we are commenting a lot on public policy, a lot of things the board, the park board, other people are involved with here. Recently, we've been involved, they've been doing some cyberbullying of us, setting up new pages, doing Twitter things. I'm kind of concerned about this. I'm not sure, since the village is very concerned about things like this, even including trying to hire a DEI consultant. I mean, I understand for $60,000, that's going to make us all maybe behave better. So I'm not sure if this is going to help us. I'm not sure if we should spend $60,000 on that. Real quick, some other bullet points, not on the agenda. I wish something would go in where Baker Square is. We were hoping for a McDonald's there. I think you're going to discuss the migrant issue later, so I might comment on that later. That's open up for public comment later. And the mural issue, I don't know if that's going to be open for public comment.
That will.
Okay, so that's a couple other things. I know this is a village board, but we have the Wilmette Park District involved in things. I assume the village is connected with this. They want to do a new dog park in another town in Glenview. I'm not sure why the village of Wilmette is getting involved with property in Glenview. So that's something, I assume the village is working with the park district on that. Why doesn't Glenview put in the dog park? Also, the park district supposedly is buying the Beth Hiller congregation over on Glenview Road, Old Glenview Road. And there hasn't been much anything that I've seen about that. I don't know if the village is involved in that. We were kind of hoping that it would go to housing or something rather than more parkland, maybe increase the tax base. So we're just looking for full disclosure and transparency and all that, and kind of want the village to focus much more on public safety, fire, trash pickup, and potholes. And with that in mind, I'm not sure why this big focus is on building the new $60 million police station to some site that no one really knows where it is. There were some people saying they might take parkland for it, but I'm curious if there's studies a new $60 million police station would improve public safety, or if they just
Speaker
want
has
to.
30 seconds.
Okay. And that's it. One last thing. I wish some other villages have a clock so they don't have to stop you at 30 seconds rather than interrupt you. But, they have a clock going and then people just look at that. So thank you for your time, and please give some consideration to those things.
Anyone else wanted to make a public comment on an item not on the agenda? Okay, with that, we'll conclude public comment. Item 3 on the agenda is the consent agenda. As described on the printed agenda, items which are either routine business or normally not debated by the village board are placed on the consent agenda. All items beginning with a 3 are on the consent agenda, and tonight the consent agenda consists of the items on page 1, beginning with item 3.1 through page 4 and ending with item 3.26. Items on the consent agenda are up for approval tonight. If an item is not removed by a member of the audience and is not removed by one of the trustees, the item will be approved and it will not be discussed. Let me begin by asking if there's any member of the audience that would like to remove an item from the consent agenda.
I have a question. 3.5, it says remove from table, but to my understanding, it's not. It is on. I am the resident in there, so it says remove from table on the printout. So that's why I was.
So that item was tabled at the last village board meeting. By being removed from the table means it will be voted on tonight.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I figure that's what you wanted.
Anybody else in the audience like to remove an item from the consent agenda? Okay. Would any of the trustees like to remove an item from the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none, may I have a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
So moved.
Trustee Smith, is there a second?
Second.
Trustee Dodd, it's been moved and seconded. Would the clerk please call the roll on the motion to adopt the consent agenda?
Trustee Dodd.
Aye.
Trustee Shepherd.
Aye.
Trustee Smith.
Aye.
Trustee Leonard.
Aye.
Trustee Kennedy.
Aye.
And President Plunkett.
Aye. Motion carries. The consent agenda has been adopted. If you are here for an item on the consent agenda, it has been approved. And to clarify for those here tonight, all of the items beginning with a 3 have been approved. There will be no further discussion of any of the items on the consent agenda. You are free to leave, but you are more than welcome to stay for part of all of our meeting. Next, we'll move to reports of officers, and the first report I have is the announcement of the proclamation of the Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month in the village of Wilmette. is it? Do you want to move up, maybe with? Okay. Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month is observed annually to celebrate the contributions that generations of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders have made to American history, society, and culture. Asian American and Pacific Islanders comprise over 12% of the population of Wilmette. I'm pleased now to announce our proclamation. Whereas all residents deserve to be treated with dignity, respect, compassion, and justice, regardless of gender, age, race, religion, economic status, sexual orientation, or physical, mental, or sensory ability. And whereas in 1990, the first Asian Pacific American Heritage Month was designated by presidential proclamation, and in 1992, Congress permanently designated May of each year as a month-long celebration that is now known as Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And whereas May was chosen to commemorate the immigration of the first Japanese immigrants to the United States in 1843 and the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad in 1869. And whereas people of Asian heritage now comprise over 12% of the village's population and have made valuable contributions to the growth of the United States and their local communities, and it is critically important that we recognize their accomplishments. And whereas the theme for 2024 is Advancing Leaders Through Innovation, which highlights the lasting contributions of the AAPI community to our nation's economic prosperity, technological advancements, and social political change through ingenuity and creativity while navigating significant cultural and systemic barriers. Whereas additional Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month information and resources can be found at asianpacificheritage.gov and wilmette.gov. Now, therefore, I, Senta Plunkett, Village President of Wilmette, Illinois, proclaim May 2024 as Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month and call upon all people of Wilmette, Illinois to learn more about those of Asian American and Pacific Islander heritage and to celebrate this month. And I know it's not May yet, but we needed to make that announcement because I have a very special festival to announce coming up Saturday, May 4th, from 1 to 4 at the Wilmette Community Recreation Center in collaboration with the Village of Wilmette, the Human Relations Commission, the Park District, and the Chamber of Commerce. We're going to have our second festival. This one will be bigger and better than last year with food vendors that we're very excited about, restaurants donating to this. So I hope you all can make it. And there's flyers by the door, so take one and pass it out. Great. Next, I have an Arbor Day proclamation, which is also coming up. Where did that go? Okay, so I have a proclamation designating April 26, 2024 as Arbor Day and presentation of the 40th Tree City USA Award recognition and 18th Growth Award from the Arbor Day Foundation. Whereas in 1872, J. Sterling Morton proposed to the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for the planting of trees, and whereas this holiday, called Arbor Day, was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska, and whereas Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world, and whereas trees can be a solution to combating climate change by reducing the erosion of our precious topsoil by wind and water, cutting heating and cooling costs, moderating the temperature, cleaning the air, producing life-giving oxygen, and providing habitat for wildlife, and whereas trees in our village increase property values, enhance the economic vitality of business areas, beautify our community, and are a source of joy, and whereas Wilmette has been recognized as a Tree City USA and Growth Award community by the Arbor Day Foundation and desires to continue its commitment to planting new trees. Now, therefore, I, Senta Plunkett, President of the Village of Wilmette, do hereby proclaim April 26, 2024 as Arbor Day. And to celebrate Arbor Day this year, you can go to the Wilmette Public Library this, on Friday, April 26th from 2 to 4 and get a free tree seedling. We've got one that was planted. My son got it at school years ago, tiny, and it has now made our planting bed, and it's taller than I am. So it's pretty exciting to see. I also want to encourage all of you. You can sign up on our website. You can apply for a free shade tree, a reimbursement through our tree planting program. So very exciting that we have our 40th Tree City USA designation this year. Moving on, I have some introductions and recommendations for appointment to the Historic Preservation Commission. So excited. I have announcement of a new chair, Tanvi Parikh, and the introduction of John Jacoby and Ariel Weininger were recommended to be appointed as commissioners. First, I want to welcome Tanvi to come up and introduce yourself. Tanvi is going to be a great new leader of our Historic Preservation Commission. She is an architect and urban planner. Welcome and thank you for agreeing to serve.
Thank you, everyone. So as Santa mentioned, I am an architect and urban planner by training. I currently work as a project manager at Skidmore, Rowing & Merrill's city design practice. A lot of you know about the iconic architecture from Skidmore, but not necessarily the role it plays in shaping cities, and that's what my interests have been for many years. So working on projects and communities with City of Chicago on the south side, and globally on a lot of large-scale mixed-use projects, as well as higher ed education projects as well. My interest in historic preservation is not just about a nod to the past, but also I deeply believe in the role it plays in creating sustainable, culturally rich, and resilient communities. So I look forward to working with all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, I want to introduce Mr. John Jacoby, who really needs no introduction, but he's our former village president. He's also served as chair of the village's minimum wage and paid sick leave working group and co-chair of the village's sesquicentennial committee. And he is a Wilmette historian, having authored the book Wilmette at 150. So thank you for agreeing to serve again in this role.
Well, that will be my pleasure. I had the pleasure of meeting Tanvi last week, and I think she's going to be a great leader for the commission, and I'm looking forward to serving. And I think there are issues of preservation that need to be addressed in the community. We have a great history here, and it deserves to be preserved.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Ariel Weininger. I appreciate you're willing to serve too. You currently serve as curator of the Illinois Holocaust Museum, and have such a great background, and has recently moved back to Wilmette, so that's exciting.
You're stealing all my lines.
I am, sorry.
So yes, I'm Ariel Weininger. I'm the chief curator of collections and exhibitions at the Illinois Holocaust Museum. I've been in that role for 14 years at this point in time. I am, as Senta said, a child of Wilmette. I grew up on the same street as one of the trustees here. We 3.5 years ago moved back to the village because specifically we had our young son Marty, who's now at Ramona in kindergarten. Historic preservation and architecture, obviously I'm committed to history and most specifically Jewish culture and history, but architecture and historic preservation has been also a great important factor in my life, and so I'm really excited to serve.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think just a quick nod to all of our members of boards and commissions. We really appreciate all the service that you do in our community. It's a lot of volunteer work, and some of you have done it in more more roles than one, and we really appreciate that work. We couldn't do what we do up here without all of that, so thank you. That's all I have for manager's notes. Do we have any report, Mr. Bremen?
Sure. Just one item is to remind the community that our annual Police Department and Historical Museum open houses are coming up on Sunday, May 5th from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Both events are free and open to the public. It'll be a great opportunity to see the challenges that the existing police facility presents to our police department and why we need a new station, and we're pursuing that project right now. So please come visit and ask questions of our police officers to better understand our project moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. So next we will move on to our standing committee reports, and we're going to start with our public safety. And I do want to let people know if you want to leave, you're free to leave. You're more than welcome to stay. We're going to start with the public safety standing committee report, and I will take over as Trustee Jaya couldn't be here. I want to introduce Ordinance 2024-011 and seek a motion to waive the rules provided in Section 2-131 of the Wilmette Village Code to adopt said ordinance. This, again, is the ordinance, let me get my, the introduction of ordinance regarding unscheduled bus drop-offs, the waiver of rules, and adoption of ordinance regarding the unscheduled bus drop-offs. So we're going to start by, I'm going to ask the board, is there a motion to adopt ordinance 2024-011?
Motion to waive the rules first.
Motion to, I'm sorry, is there a motion to waive the rules first?
So moved.
Okay, Trustee Dodd, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Trustee Shepherd, and I understand that a voice vote is only what's necessary for this?
That's correct.
Okay. All
Aye.
those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No, okay. So the next step is there a motion to adopt ordinance 2024-011, an ordinance regarding unscheduled bus drop-offs?
So moved.
Trustee Smith, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Trustee Kennedy. So I'm going to start first by turning this over to Mr. Bremen.
Okay. Thank you, President Plunkett. The ordinance up for adoption tonight establishes days and times during which unscheduled buses may drop off passengers at the Wilmette Metro Station. As background, 68 unscheduled buses from Texas have dropped off an estimated 2,700 new arrivals at the Wilmette Metro Station as they pass through our community on their way to Chicago or other regional destinations. The Village's Police Department has assisted in guiding passengers from the buses to the Metro train so they can access the City of Chicago new arrival landing zone, which has the necessary resources to provide food, shelter, medical care, and social services. The process of guiding passengers to the train has been managed from a community caretaking perspective, in which we seek to ensure all residents and visitors to our community are safe and treated with compassion, dignity, and respect. The vast majority of bus drop-offs have been orderly, and none of them have presented public safety concerns. To date, this activity has not hindered our police department's ability to respond to emergency calls for service. That said, the increasing number of buses coming to Wilmette has led to unscheduled drop-offs in the middle of the night or very early morning hours, which makes it difficult for our police officers to support bus passengers and adequately serve the community due to reduced staffing and train availability during overnight hours. To ensure the village can continue to serve our community and treat everyone living in and visiting Wilmette with compassion, dignity, and respect, we are recommending establishing days and times during which unscheduled buses may drop off in Wilmette. The recommended time frame is 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Monday through Friday. During this time frame, we have additional police resources available to us, and per the City of Chicago, it provides the best opportunity to expedite access for new arrivals into Chicago's shelter system, as anyone arriving outside of the landing zone's regular operating hours must stay there overnight on a CTA bus in Chicago before they can access city services and shelters.
Any questions from trustees for Mr. Bremen? And I think just to clarify, the hours that we're talking about, those were based on your discussions with the Office of Emergency Management in Chicago?
Correct.
I know there are a lot of people here that would like to speak on this issue. Could I just have a general show of hands to see how we are? Okay. Great. So I want to, everyone will get a chance to speak. I just want to have a few reminders. So when you come up to the podium, please state your name and where you live. All speakers will have up to 3 minutes, and all comments should come to the board, not to anybody else in the audience. Mr. Hallgren will let you know when you have 30 seconds and when your time is up. We want to give everybody an opportunity to be heard, so obviously no clapping or cheering. If any questions arise through the course of public comment that require clarification, we will do our best to answer that following the conclusion of all public comment, but we won't interrupt the public comment as it's going.
I'm sorry, could I get a clarification now? Mr. Raymond said between the hours of 8 and 4, were there certain days of the week we wanted to limit this to?
Sure. So the ordinance as proposed is between 8 and 4:30, Monday through Friday.
Anytime, buses can come anytime, Monday through Friday?
That is the ordinance as
I
proposed.
think that's
Okay.
a question. The question should come up as part of public comment.
Okay, yeah.
The ordinance include an enforcement mechanism where if a bus arrives outside of those times, and what would happen to the riders on that bus?
Yes, it does. So,
I think you want to explain
yeah,
that.
we'll do that now, and then if more questions come up, we will handle that at the end of public comment.
So, enforcement provisions included in the ordinance are fairly consistent of which are included in other ordinances in nearby communities. They include fines ranging from $50 to $750 per passenger if a bus arrives outside of the permitted hours, as well as the possibility of impoundment of the vehicles. Again, consistent with City of Chicago and
Who's
ordinances
being
in other
fined?
communities. The bus companies are being fined. So all the fines apply to the bus companies. Our process for enforcement will be to provide for a 10 to 14 day warning period so that everybody is aware of our new regulations and restrictions before we start issuing fines and before impoundment. We would then issue fines if buses continue to violate and come outside of the allowed hours. We would impound the vehicles. So we have a 3-step enforcement process that we're confident will be effective. Any other questions?
Sure. Well, I'm just going to follow up with you then. In terms of if a bus comes afterwards, we would fine the officer but allow the passengers to disembark?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So if you want to, we're going to make a list of questions during public comment that we can answer at the end. Normally, it's not a question and answer session, but it's tough.
I think something there's an explanation. So with the ordinance in place right now that you're recommending, how much would that have, like, what would have been the April 2024 total amount of buses that would have been reduced from CA to April, or sorry, from year to date? What would that have been with the ordinance in place?
Okay, so we'll write that down, but for the future, we have a lot of people that want to speak. So I understand that there might be some questions, but I'm going to open it up for public comment. And if there are things that need clarification at the end, I'm sure. Okay, Trustee Dodd?
So do you just want to clarify for people, you can come up and speak on behalf of what you specifically might want to say. You could also come up and just say, I have a question, and that question can be recorded, and then we'll come back to that. So I want to clarify for people what they can do here, because I think there's some confusion. So if you have a question and you want to speak, you can ask the question and speak. You're just limited to 3 minutes. I think we're here to make sure people understand what we're trying to do.
Yeah, thanks, Trustee Dodd. That's helpful. Okay, with that being said, maybe we can, line up in threes to start speaking, just so everybody, we can move efficiently.
Good evening. Michael Rothstein. I've been a resident of Wilmette since 1997. First off, I want to commend all of my fellow Wilmette residents who have done so much to volunteer to try to provide a humane welcome to the migrants arriving on the buses who did not choose to come to Wilmette and are just dropped here because of what I think is a misguided policy from the governments of Texas and perhaps other places. And I also commend our police department and the board and all the village officials who've helped to create a humane welcoming. The ordinance on its face makes perfect sense and is very reasonable. I have one concern is whether or not, and this is a question, whether the board knows whether or not any other communities that have enacted similar restrictions, whether those restrictions have been followed and honored by the state of Texas and the bus companies that are working for the state of Texas, and produced a more orderly flow, or when ordinances like this have been enacted, have the bus drivers in the state of Texas simply just moved on to other communities that don't have restrictions. I think if the latter is the case, if that's been the practice, I can't support, or I'd ask you not to support the ordinance, because all we're doing is taking the human need and pushing it off into other people. If that is the case, that this has not worked, I would hope the board would consider, if they do not enact the ordinance at this time, or even if it does, to work with other communities to have them enact similar ordinances. Because the more communities that enact these ordinances, then the bus companies in Texas would have to reconsider what they're doing, and perhaps might, if they're going to continue sending migrants, do so in a more orderly way. Those are my thoughts and questions.
Hello, my name is Susan Hemren. I am a relatively new resident of Wilmette. I purchased a condo near the Linden CTA station a little over a year ago. Before that, I lived for 25 years on Central Street in Evanston. And what I would like to speak to tonight is the fact that I have recently learned, just in the last day or so, that there is going to be a state bill introduced soon, before the end of the session. The bill is being sponsored by the Democratic Caucus's Committee on New Arrivals, which is chaired by Jennifer Gong Gershwin of the 17th District, who represents the western part of Wilmette. The representative for the 18th District, Robin Gable, who represents the eastern part of Wilmette, is a member of the committee. I saw a reference to this on the internet last night, and I spent this afternoon trying to track it down. There was a press release put out by the working group that Representative Gong Gershwin heads on the 18th of April. I went ahead and I posted this press release from that committee on three of the Wilmette Facebook groups: Wilmette Connection, Wilmette Connections with an S, and Neighborly Wilmette. So I would hope that if people wanted to take a look at that, they could see it. From the press release, it seems that the purpose of this proposed law is to avoid exactly the problem of pushing things to other localities with just a patchwork of local laws. It actually calls for all the details of it were not clear from the press release, and because of this, the major point I'm going to argue tonight is to urge the board to postpone making a decision on the local ordinances for a week or two until you've had time to clarify what is going on with the state. And I spoke with a member of Gershwin Gong's office this evening. She said that the plan was to introduce it before the end of the session, and because Democrats have the majority in both the Assembly and the state, there was hope that it could be passed before the end of the session, and that it would...
The speaker's time is up.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you to the village trustees for volunteering your time and skills to our village. My name is Heather Oliver. And I've been a resident of Wilmette for over 30 years. Deborah Morris and I, and Deborah's been a resident for 40 plus years, are the Wilmette liaisons with the nonprofit SALT, that the Village of Wilmette has partnered with this in this humanitarian effort. We've been leading the rapid response team that supports the Wilmette Police Department in meeting the migrant buses at the metro station. The rapid response team is an extra bonus that passes out a universal take care package and coat to each of the passengers on the bus, time permitting. The migrants have traveled under circumstances we can't even imagine to arrive here. We are some of the first people to treat them with dignity and kindness. In collaboration with the Wilmette Police Department, we've developed a safe and efficient process to support the migrants departing the buses and getting on the metro train. We would estimate that we have supported the Wilmette Police Department in greeting 40 of the 62 unscheduled buses. We had 2 earlier today that have stopped in Wilmette. Deborah and I support the proposed ordinance with the time limits on the buses arriving in our village. Wilmette has a very dedicated police force, but the unscheduled buses with the increased frequency are starting to strain our resource and their ability to serve and protect our community, as well as maintain safety for the migrants that arrive from Texas at the metro station. We've been averaging 7 buses a week. Last Saturday, 3 buses arrived in a 4-hour period and 2 at the same time. Unscheduled buses have arrived at 1 a.m. when the next train is not for several hours. Another unscheduled bus has arrived at 5 a.m. and the migrants were let off the bus and they were unattended at the metro station. The proposed ordinance with the time limits on the buses will allow the migrants to arrive early in the city of Chicago so they can receive services from city and state agencies and not have to be put on warming buses overnight. The Wilmette Police will be able to better manage the safety of the migrants at the metro stations when the buses arrive, as well as serving and protecting the residents of Wilmette. Wilmette should be proud of their humanitarian efforts in partnership with SALT, as thousands of people have been greeting safely and with dignity and compassion. The ordinance is needed and necessary at this time for the safety of the migrants and the safety for the residents of Wilmette. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Laura Templin. I've been a Wilmette resident for 12 years. And I would like to ask if you saw this man getting off a bus in downtown Wilmette, would you welcome him? Would you give him a care package and clothing and gift cards? I mean, he looks like a nice guy. This is Jose Ibarra. He's 26 years old from Venezuela. And in 2022, he walked across our border. And in February of this year, he was arrested for the murder of a 22-year-old college nursing student. That nursing student was jogging on her campus at UGA in broad daylight. This could be anyone's daughter in our community. The migrants who are being bused into Wilmette have circumvented our immigration laws by crossing the southern border, and they're being unloaded near our homes and schools. This is a reckless gamble with our safety. The migrants coming here have unknown backgrounds, so it's only natural that we would feel a sense of unease. We owe it to ourselves and to ensure the safety and security of our friends and our families, and to neighboring communities who have already said no to accepting buses. Some have said that migrants are boarding the trains and going down to the city, so why should we care? But a large number are staying up here, and we see that through the panhandling that's taking place, especially at the Jewel on Green Bay Road. The Chicago mayor has already said that their ability to continue taking migrants may have an end date, which puts added pressure on us to come up with good and smart solutions. This is an important issue. We cannot let the fabric of our community undergo this level of change without our input or our consent. One town hall meeting is not enough. Every resident's voice should be heard and should be a part of the decision-making process. You poll us to get our views on community events, how we should use our parks, you can certainly poll us on this issue as well. So I'm asking that we work together to find a solution that strikes a better balance between ensuring our safety and demonstrating the compassion that we are known for. And as a final question, just for my own education, I would like to know, is everyone up here on the board a resident of Wilmette?
Yes.
Everyone?
I can answer yes.
Everyone sitting up there?
Yes.
Yes, you have to be.
Oh,
to be
no,
elected.
every elected official.
Every elected
Okay,
official.
I know.
Are we paying people up here to make decisions on our behalf that do not live in Wilmette?
We are volunteers.
So that's no. Not everyone
We
up
are
here
not
lives in
paid.
Wilmette.
We are
That's
not
a, that's a grave disappointment to me as a taxpayer.
I'm sorry.
Think that everybody what?
Enough. There's no clapping. There's no clapping at our board meetings.
I'm Attila Farberg. I've been here in Wilmette since 1984. I'm going to come right out. I would like to see a total ban on all unscheduled migrant bus drop-offs. There should be no migrant bus drop-offs in Wilmette, regardless whether day or night. I, too, am an immigrant. However, before being admitted into the U.S., I had to do all the following while I was still in my home country in Canada. Number one, I had to provide bank account statements proving that I have enough money to support myself and that I will not become a financial burden to the American taxpayers. Number two, I had to attest that I do not have criminal record of any kind, which was easily verifiable since I came from an electronic country, Canada. Number three, I had to provide doctor certification and blood tests to prove that I do not have any communicable diseases. Number four, I had to attest that I'm sincere of mind and body and that I'm of good character with no criminal intentions. Number five, I had to provide job references from my previous employments in Canada to prove that I have valid job skills. I don't see any of this coming from these people who have broken the U.S. law by entering this country illegally in the first place. In other words, these migrants have simply barged over our United States border since invited by the current administration in order to be provided all the freebies that we are currently providing to them. They need to go back to their original countries, and then if they still want to enter the United States, they need to apply for a green card, just like I had to do. I do not want to see a nickel of my tax dollar to go to these invaders. That is all.
Hello, Jeff Axelrod. I live in Wilmette. Please reconsider the proposed ordinance regulating bus drop-offs of migrants at our metro station. While I understand there are logistical concerns, this ordinance risks undermining Wilmette's role as a beacon of support for these vulnerable individuals. If we were the first community to consider passing reasonable-sounding regulations like this, it would have been a no-brainer. But we've been there, done that in this neck of the woods, and we know exactly how it plays out. The Tribune reported that even modest regulations in nearby towns have resulted in buses simply diverting to other communities. As you know, many of these migrants are headed to Chicago to be vaccinated before accessing the shelter system, and Wilmette's volunteers have been critical in helping them through this process. Without Wilmette's established volunteer network, when buses relocate to other towns like Glenview, these migrants may be left with far fewer resources to assist them. The ordinance mentions a, quote, drain on the village's resources and operations, unquote, as justification, yet I read no mention of Wilmette seeking financial or other forms of assistance from the township or county to help manage this situation. Also, some of you here today may not know that the village disbanded its trained volunteer community emergency response team, which could have been a valuable resource in welcoming and assisting these arriving migrants. I would welcome the village to reinstate this important program so it can be more tightly coupled with the village to help relieve the perception of burden on the village staff. Compared to the immense hardships and inconveniences many of these refugees have faced in fleeing violence and poverty in their home countries, the minor inconveniences experienced by our affluent community ring trivial. The least we can do is maintain Wilmette's welcoming stance rather than handing these buses off to unprepared neighbors. I urge you to reject this ordinance and allow our community to continue serving as a shining example for those vulnerable individuals as they make their way to Chicago. I know that there are even more volunteers ready and willing to provide assistance if the village asks the community, rather than sending buses to our other suburbs. Thank you for your consideration.
Hi, good evening. My name is Cindy Fay, and I want to start by thanking Heather Oliver, and she just spoke about the work that she's been doing, the good work she's been doing. I do, however, disagree with the idea that the volunteers are overtaxed, and I think that there are many people in Wilmette. If you remember the coat drive that the village organized, there are dozens, if not hundreds, of people who are ready, willing, and able to step up and to take over if people are getting tired, because we are really eager to be a welcoming community, and we are really welcome to say bienvenidos to our new friends and our new neighbors. It's news that I just found out about the Jennifer Gone Gershowitz proposal, and this is very. I think it changes a lot of things that a lot of people are thinking, because if there's a statewide ordinance, it will be very different than us taking an ordinance that, say, another village does not have. And my work this weekend was to survey people in my neighborhood about, do you approve of the ordinance for Wilmette as it stands? And when people were asked if they would sign a petition that said, I would like Wilmette to continue to be a beacon of support for migrants arriving in our community. Even modest regulations on bus drop-offs in other communities have resulted in buses moving on to other towns. Wilmette has mobilized an established network of community support and assistance to help migrants prior to boarding the train to the city. Please allow Wilmette's volunteers to continue serving those in need. And I'd like to submit this, if I could, with all the signatures on that. It is a very different thing if now we have a statewide ban than if we are simply passing the buck or pulling the welcome mat out from underneath these poor, beleaguered people who are coming. I just walked over. Heather was right over there and there was a busload right now. It was tired moms and children. And next month is Mother's Day, and I hope that you will all reach into your hearts, deep in your hearts, and realize that these are families who are tired, and they do not pose a threat. And the intervention.
No comments from the audience, please.
Thank you. This is not a police issue. As the village has acknowledged, there have been no public safety issues. I just saw a single woman officer standing to the side. She had nothing to do but have a smile on her face. There were lots of volunteers there to welcome people and to help them to stand in line to board on the train. So thank you all very much for all you do, and I hope that you'll do the reasonable, logical, compassionate thing.
Hi, everyone. My name is Carrie Esposto, and I'm a 3-year transplant to Wilmette. I have been proud to call this home, but our transparency and solutioning to the migrant crisis is not something I am proud of, and I'll explain why. Since early April, I have received 12 replies from Mike and our board members trying to piece together and understand, why is Wilmette getting migrants? What are we doing about it aside from talking in broad strokes about safety measures? Why is the most thing that's publicized is concentrated around outreach efforts, and are we gathering diversified perspectives? While I've gotten a lot of replies, thank you, our headline has never been clear. Prior to Friday at 8 p.m., Wilmette's headline has been, since 12/31, Wilmette has safely processed migrant buses with police. Volunteers are collecting and distributing goods. We continue to stay apprised of the situation. The headline expanded after Friday at 8 p.m. Since 12/31, Wilmette has processed 68 buses and 2,700 migrants. Wilmette police have safely directed most buses, but nighttime drop-offs were challenging. Wilmette and Glen Ellen are receiving the majority of Texas buses. Intake to Chicagoland is expected to increase 50% in May and 150% come June. Today, there's an ordinance meeting.
What would complete the headline is as follows. Wilmette allows for unannounced and unregistered buses. 195% more buses came in March and April versus January and February, and this continues to trend upwards month over month. 35% of all migrant buses in Chicagoland process in Wilmette first. The village cannot get any clarity as to why this is the case or why numbers continue to rise. Wilmette has officially become the migrant welcome center for many Chicagoland migrants, and the press deems us as such. So what needs to happen? While the ordinance is a starting point, it's not enough. While there are drop-off times, buses can still come unannounced and unregistered. If violated, meaning buses come with outside of that window, fines may result, starting at $50. The fact that there haven't been issues with daytime drop-off to dates is a poor governing solution and benchmark for the future. What is needed? Everything outlined plus required registration for each bus and guaranteed harder fines. This summer is when we need the undivided commitment of the police force the most. Wilmette is filled with kids and visitors. There is not one member of the village board today who can tell me what it is like to send a child to elementary school these days, a place ridden with fear.
30 seconds.
And trust me, I am the first one to support gun regulation. In the same way a car manufacturer would be irresponsible to implement an airbag that malfunctioned once in a while, compromising safety, even for a tad, via a less strict ordinance than what's safer is irresponsible. What's needed is to put our taxpayer residents and their families, not migrants, first. Preserve and prioritize our police force appropriately and not agree to a plan that leaves the door open even for a little bit.
The speaker's
Thank you.
No clapping, please.
Hi, my name is Lisa Reese. I'm been here 5 years. I live on Michigan Avenue. I'm not going to say I'm for or against either situations here, but the crime in my neighborhood during Christmas was very terrifying for me and my family. My neighbor 4 houses down is 90 years old that lives by herself, and it was a South American Venezuela crime group that has come filtered in our neighborhoods at Christmas time and breaking in at houses at 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. We have cameras up at our house, and we're there with our children all year long with a big dog, but I do worry about the safety of my neighbors. Recently, I got an email from the St. Joseph School, which my son attends. There's a measles outbreak in the area, and I'm very concerned about the buses filtering in, not having vaccinations prior to that. Lastly, I think a question was raised about the board members or the village manager being paid to be here. I'd like an answer from that.
We'll answer at the end of the meeting.
Okay, because it is in the notes. Overall, I don't care if the buses are going to be here. It needs to be acceptable hours. I think it needs to be for the safety of our community. And if people want to welcome them, they're free to do that. But please make sure it's safe and reasonable for our police officers and for our families that live here. We pay a lot of money to be here. I left the city to have a better home here. I wanted to get away from people on the streets begging, and that's why we came here. But I'm not going to tolerate this, and I will leave. And that's the thing is you can have residents that live here, but having people come in and live on the streets, it's not humane for these people to come on the buses and have nowhere to go. I welcome them. I welcome you guys to welcome them in your homes. And as we see that happen here in the community, maybe other people will follow suit. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mary Ramon, and I've had the honor of volunteering. I'm bilingual, and I've been working with the migrants when they arrive. And there's nothing like looking at people in the eyes when they arrive as a group. I've never seen anything more impactful in my life, and I'm a counselor, seeing groups of people who are hungry, scared, tired, little girl urinating on herself. Just, these are families. And I want to remind everyone here that if you're an American, your heritage is either Native American, slave, refugee, or immigrant. We are immigrants. And I want to really thank the board for everything you've done so far to be a leader among the north suburbs and being a truly welcoming community. And I'm so proud. I moved here from Miami over 5 years ago with my children. I'm so proud to live in a suburb that has not passed an ordinance and has coordinated volunteers to respond and support newcomers. I would like to ask you, please, to unequivocally support migrants, either by finding creative solutions to be able to meet the demands of increased buses, for example, partnering with other suburbs, applying for grants to increase infrastructure, or at the very least, keeping any ordinance as flexible as possible, because the last thing we want to do is completely turn them away by having hours that are too restrictive and not requiring notice, and still letting buses come during established hours would allow for them to be safely processed. The main reason that the board has given for an ordinance is the lack of police support to be able to meet the buses when they arrive in the middle of the night. While I understand this point, I think it's worth asking why we feel we need a patrol car at every bus when we have had so far so many buses without incident. And when I've come to volunteer, the police have just turned it over to me, actually, because I speak Spanish. But we're fortunate to have low crime rates. We continue to have low crime rates. There are good and bad apples in every bunch. We cannot assume that anyone from any country is a bad apple. We have low crime rates in our town, and God forbid if there really was an emergency situation, I know that our suburban police do already have partnerships where neighboring police forces would come provide backup. So thank you again for your compassionate response and consideration to the migrant situation.
My name is Kevin Sowers. I've been a resident of Wilmette for 8 years, and I've had the pleasure to work with Deborah and with Heather to greet many of the buses in the past couple months. I just want to clarify, President Plunkett, the ordinance on the table is not about banning buses or not, right?
We'll make a list of questions.
Yeah. I believe we're here tonight to decide whether to limit the hours, not whether to ban them, and I'm in full support of limiting the hours. The police have been amazing. The folks that think people are getting off the bus and wandering around, and that did occur when the buses dropped at 1 a.m., that does not happen when they drop at a normal time and we're properly staffed. Those migrants stay on those buses until 10 minutes before the train comes. They come off, they get in an orderly line, they're outside all of about 10 or 15 minutes, and we put them on a train and they go downtown where they can get the proper care. I'm immensely proud to be part of Wilmette and to have this reputation. And we all know towns on the North Shore don't always have the best reputation, but I'm going to just read from a Chicago Tribune article, a lengthy article on April 8th on the entire migrant journey, and it ended with these 2 paragraphs. The following morning, Regifo said her family was still on the warming bus. They'd been given milk and cereal but didn't have tennis shoes, she said. The only help they'd received in Illinois, they said, were the bags they received from the pile offered to them by the Wilmette volunteers as they ran to the metro train. This is what a community is. This is something we should be proud of. It doesn't mean that immigration is a right or wrong issue. We're not here to solve that. We're a village of Wilmette. And obviously there's bigger macro level things coming on, but I think the best thing we can do is have a human response. I had the joy of giving out 40 stuffed animals to 40 kids last week and screeching with joy. They were so happy to get something so simple because they've been through such a bad journey. And given how under control this situation is, and given how meaningful it is to these people, for our village to be able to provide this is something everyone in here should be proud of.
Hello. I wasn't going to speak, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm Jessica Corey. I've been a resident for about 10 years. And I'm Jessica Corey. I've been a resident for about 10 years, but I've talked to Michael Brayman a few times, and I just feel like there hasn't been a lot of transparency on the migrant bus drop-offs. There's a newsletter you can opt into to get, and only 7,600 people have opted in. That's maybe a third of Wilmette residents. And I think people just don't really know what's going on. They have no clue. I'm a mom. I have 4 kids. My kids are in elementary school and high school. And we don't really know what's going on unless you try to find it. I mean, I tried to go on to the website and I asked Michael, where the information was about the drop-offs initially. And he said, go to our website. I couldn't find it. I called the people he works with. They couldn't find it either, any information on it. So I think there's just been not a lot of transparency on what's going on. And a lot of the people that I'm friends with, my kids go to school, they walk to school. I live in East Wilmette. They walk to school. They walk to Panera. They walk to, they walk everywhere. The beach. I mean, they walk all over the place. And I think people who are making these decisions, I think you need to look at it from the perspective of a parent who has young kids who leave the house and they leave at 11, they come home at 3 or 4 in the summer. And we're worried. I mean, we're a little bit worried that we don't know what's going on because there hasn't been enough information out there about if there's enough police officers to handle the amount. And it sounds like it's been increasing too. It's going to be increasing. So I think it's just, I would love to have a letter sent out to every single, resident of Wilmette, and just a letter, a hard copy, and just let people know what's happening, what's going on, because people just don't know. And I feel like it's been kind of hidden from us a little bit. And it would be nice to know all the details so more people can come here to voice their concerns. I only knew about it because a friend of mine, heard it from somebody else, but, that's it. So, and I'm actually here on behalf of a lot of people. They're at games and they're cooking for 5 kids at home, so they can't be here, but they have young kids. I just worry that the people making the decisions don't have kids my age. They're older. All you guys have older kids a lot, or you maybe don't live here. I just think that, you need to think about how you were when you had younger kids. That's all. All right, that's it. That's it.
Good evening, board members. Mark Karras, been a Wilmette resident since 2000. I generally favor the ordinance, at least the spirit of the ordinance, to try and make it easier for the migrants that are coming to our area. And but my observation is really an overarching one. I happened to be at the metro station today when a bus pulled up from Texas. About 80 people got off the bus. And gosh, they look like nice people. I mean, every other person said hello. Every third person said thank you to me, just as a Chicago area resident. And I really felt for these people. But I couldn't help but think that the way we're going about this, as a society, is just so inefficient. People are coming from Texas to Wilmette to go to Chicago, to go to areas of Chicago that are already underserved. And people in these communities are saying, now my field house, his program's being canceled because I have people that are here that we can't afford. It just seems to me like and I know we're a small village and we can only do so much, but I really think that the board members and our citizenry should be reaching out to our elected officials at the state level, the governor, our senator. I'm going to call both senators and my congressman, Congressman Schneider. This has to be addressed at the border. And usually when there's international humanitarian, because this is an international crisis, there's international organizations that are down there. The Red Cross should be down there. The UN should be down there. FEMA should be down there. And there should be refugee centers, tent cities like we see in war zones around the world where people can get fresh water and food. The kids can get some schooling. The environment is relatively safe, and people can be processed accordingly. Because the way we're going about it is it to me just seems the height of inefficiency. And beyond that, then of course there's the foreign policy issue of what's going on in Central and South America, where people are coming here. And again, I know that's an international issue, but it just seems to me, and I would just encourage you, just do what you can to reach out to our elected officials at the state level, the governor's office. Again, I'm going to do the same thing to reach out to our congresspeople and so forth to handle this in a way that's humane and efficient for everybody. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Lee Goodman. I spent the last 2 weeks in Eagle Pass, Texas. I just got back today. That's the town you see on the news all the time, where they've got the big orange buoys and the boats and the National Guard. That's the town where all the politicians go to pose for pictures. While I was there, I stood on the Mexican side in a town called Piedras Negras. I looked across the Rio Grande River, and one day I saw a family of 6, a pregnant woman, a young child, 4 others, who had crossed the river at some point. They were legally on United States soil, but the governor of Texas has something he calls Operation Lone Star. He's defying the president and the national government, saying that even though these people have a right to be here, he won't let them into Texas. So these people walked along the bank trying to find a way to get past the razor wire that's piled row upon row, and they couldn't do it. And they got to the boat ramp where the National Guard puts in their big swamp boats, the one with big propellers, and the guard there, the sentry, wouldn't let them in. And I stood and I watched them have to just keep walking down the banks, and they couldn't get in. It was heartbreaking to see, and it was especially heartbreaking because I knew I was coming back to Wilmette, where you were going to consider a law that was intended to do exactly the same thing they're doing, and that is treat people as if they were problems and push the people and the problems off on someone else. This law and the people who want it say they're trying to protect people. That's not what you're trying to do. You're trying to control them. These people do not need your protection. They have made it thousands of miles, many of them walking hundreds of miles. They have contended with and paid off corrupt officials and cartel members. Many of the women have been raped or threatened with sexual assault. They virtually all had to pay money to get here. They have gone through terrible things because where they're coming from is worse. These people, all they want to do is to be able to keep going on to Chicago on their journey. They pose no threat to you whatsoever. But you don't want them walking on your sidewalks. You don't want them seen on Green Bay Road. You don't want them standing in front of the Jewel. You know you can't ban them because they're all here perfectly legally. So what you're trying to do is to stop the buses that bring them here. One of two things will happen if this law goes through. Either the people will sit on the buses, maybe for a few hours. The buses' engines will be running, so the air conditioning and the heat will be running. They probably won't have any food. The toilets may or may not be working. Or the other thing is they'll go to another town, and that's exactly what has happened every place that has enacted a law like this. Because I tell you one thing that's not going to happen. The bus companies down there are not going to coordinate and try and match your schedule. I stood in one of the shelters where they're loading these buses. It's run by Sister, now I forget her name. She's with the Catholic Church, one of the orders there. And what happens is the guy stands there with a clipboard and he takes names. And when you get 20 names of people who want to go to Chicago, he sends a bus. There's no schedule. There's no coordination. There's no way to control this. So there's no way your law is going to work the way you're pretending it's going to work.
I'm sorry. We have to give everybody 3 minutes.
Thank you. Years from now, people who arrive before tonight
I'm sorry, your time is up.
will be asked by their children and their grandchildren what it was like to arrive in Wilmette. And if they arrive before tonight, they'll be able to say, I was greeted and taken care of by volunteers and people who gave me what I needed. And if they arrive after tonight, if you pass this ordinance, what they're going to say...
I'm sorry. We're allowing everybody 3 minutes, so I would ask for the next person to speak.
Thank you very much. If they arrive after tonight, they're going to have to say...
Respect the village president, please.
You're being disrespectful.
No talking from the audience, but thank you.
Good evening, President Plunkett and trustees. Thank you all for your tremendous service, and the village staff, who's very hardworking, who I've always found to be great at communications. I'm John Marshall. I'm a 30-year resident of Wilmette. A couple things important to note. As some people have alluded to, the people on these buses are asylum seekers, which is a legal process in the United States. They're not here illegally when they arrive in Wilmette. And also, many studies have shown that immigrants actually have lower crime rates than people who are native-born and have lived in this country for many years. So something also to consider. I hope the village continues to be welcoming as part of its policy, its stated policy. And I think the volunteers, led by Heather Oliver and others, have done a tremendous job working with village staff, working with our police department. So far, it seems to have been working quite well. On the surface, the proposed ordinance does seem reasonable, and I understand trying to get them to Chicago by nightfall. My concern, as others have expressed, is that the buses will decide not to drop off in Wilmette anymore. So I have a question. Is there any reason to believe, if you pass this ordinance, that the buses would still arrive in Wilmette during the hours that are stated? Or is it much more likely that they're just going to go to much more distant suburbs where they're likely to not receive as good of a reception as Wilmette has been doing? Other question for you is, Cook County has, I believe, $20 million in grant money available to work with suburbs to help with the asylum seekers who are coming here. Article in the Tribune a week or two ago said that very little of that money has been claimed so far. That money is available. So I'd like to think that the village might be able to think creatively about maybe ways to get grants to help continue the tremendous volunteer effort by the village that's been going on so far. Maybe a bilingual social worker could be hired to staff some of the later hours so that the buses could arrive, not just during the circumscribed hours in the ordinance. Also think the suggestion to wait to see what happens with the Gon-Gershowitz bill in the legislature before you make any decision on the ordinance would be a wise one. Given that if her bill is passed, that could really change the state of play here. So thank you very much for your time, and look forward to hearing your discussion.
Hi, good evening. My name is Dr. Monica Rodriguez. I'm a faculty at Northwestern. I started the Latino Studies program at Northwestern. And my comments tonight is I appreciate that the spirit of concern that some of these ordinances are being created can be very grounded in taking care of humans. I appreciate that. I don't think this is an easy solution. I do hope that you consider the effect of the message that the ordinance would provide, which is one I think which is highly anti-immigrant. I urge you to think about the ways in which that Wilmette can do more actually for our incoming guests into Wilmette. We have wonderful volunteers, but I also feel like this community of mine that I participate in, I feel like could actually do more. We're a wealthy suburb. We're a wealthy village in comparison to what these folks have. The village I want to be part of, the community I want to be part of, comes with heart, with compassion, with understanding of the plight of people who are in the less fortunate situation that we're in. So that's where I'm coming from. That's what I hope you think about. In the broad scope of immigration in the United States, we know which side ends up looking pretty good, which is those communities that lead with their heart and understanding that we are all in this together. And so that's what I hope you do for us. Thank you.
I'm George Pierce, longtime resident of Wilmette, and I, from time to time, have volunteered over at the train station when buses have arrived. I want to thank all those who have been involved in making this current process very safe, very organized, and very meaningful. I don't volunteer nearly as much as the two individuals right here and many others, but when I have been involved, it's been extremely organized, extremely safe, and it's if to the extent it can be effective, it's an effective process as to what's going on right now. I understand the need for the ordinance that's proposed, and I support it, and thank you for all you're doing on this.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica Siegel. I have lived in Wilmette with my family for 4 years, and before that, I lived with my husband in the city, but I grew up in Highland Park, so I'm a North Shore resident through and through, North Shore native. And first, I just want to thank this board. Several of you were there. I worked very closely with many of you to get this going in the beginning when we started with just a coat drive and welcoming people. I also want to thank Heather and Deborah and everyone from SALT who's been incredible and put together an organized, very efficient process. And I want to thank the people in Wilmette and neighboring communities that have donated thousands and thousands of coats, all of the toiletries, the food, everything that's being given out. As you all know, there's been no taxpayer money spent on any of that. It's all private donations. In addition, I want to let everyone know that since January, our North Shore Neighbors Say Bienvenidos group has, in various different ways, we're not a super organized, we're very much grassroots coming together. We've raised over $80,000 in private donations that have gone towards different groups that are supporting these migrants. This is a community that cares. The majority of people in our town, I believe, have their hearts in the right place. The first bus that I was there welcoming, it was 20 degrees outside, and babies, infants, children, toddlers, moms were getting off the bus in T-shirts and Crocs. They were crying. I do not speak Spanish. I have no connection to this issue. I I didn't know what I was doing, and I was putting blankets on top of crying 3-year-olds who were freezing cold. So whatever your politics are, whatever fear people in the room might have about some of these people, I don't think that Wilmette should stop welcoming 3-year-olds who are starving and cold. In terms of the ordinance, I think that this is a reasonable ordinance on its face. I appreciate the work that's been put into it. I know that compared to other ordinances, this is a lenient ordinance. And if I thought that the bus companies would follow it, I would completely support it. And I would be urging everyone that I know to completely support it. Unfortunately, I share the concerns that have been mentioned earlier that as we've seen in other towns, any ordinance is effectively a ban. The buses are going to stop coming. As we've heard, as we know, the way that the system works from Texas, they can't follow a schedule. They're loading up the buses. They're coming. I would love them to. And I should add also, if the Jennifer Gahn-Gershowitz bill passes on a state level, I would support that as well. If everyone had a uniform response and we weren't just pushing people to a town where they won't be welcomed, I would support that. But realistically, if this passes, it will be a ban. People are going to stop coming. They're going to go somewhere where they're not going to get supported.
The speaker has 30 seconds.
And I just want to thank you all for everything that you've done and say, again, I would love to see some creative thinking. I would love to see us apply for the $20 million in grant funding from the county. I would support us doing more. As everyone knows here, I would support housing. I know many people don't share that view, but many people do as well. I think we have a lot of wealth, we have a lot of resources, and we have a lot of people that want to see those shared. Thank you.
Scott Britton, 1509 Executive Lane in Glenview. Sorry, I'm not a Wilmette resident, but I am the Cook County Commissioner for this district. And I'm the guy with the $20 million, so I guess that's why I wanted to weigh in on this. And let's be honest, there's a microphone. I'm a politician. I'm going to try and go up and talk. So first off, though, I want to say a very significant thank you to the President, to the Board of Trustees, and to Mike Brayman, who has been a tremendous partner throughout my time in office and also on this issue specifically. But I can tell you that the speakers who seem to think that the village of Wilmette and perhaps the president is calling up Governor Abbott and asking him to send people to Wilmette, that is not what's going on. They're coming here because it's close to the metro station. They have tickets that have already been purchased so they can then head downtown. They are doing this because this is a safe community where they know that they're going to be taken care of. This is all intentional. And this is all coming from decisions made politically by a state, not the state of Illinois. And so I can tell you that I think the thing that this board has to consider, again, I was a 12-year trustee in Glenview, I know the decisions, and these are tough ones, is it safe for these individuals to be dropped off at 2 o'clock in the morning in Wilmette when there's not another train until 5 or 5:30? I'm concerned about that. That's why my friend Jennifer Gahn-Gershowitz has proposed this legislation in Springfield. But you have to deal with this today. And I understand that you have to respond to the residents of Wilmette and also to the needs of these migrants who we are taking care of their health care through Cook County. We have just assigned $70 million to provide food for those individuals in the city of Chicago once they get to the drop-off locations. And we do have a $20 million amount that I spoke to Mike about today that we will try and use as best we can to reimburse any expenses. And I give a tremendous shout out to SALT and to North Shore Neighbors. They're doing wonderful things. We cannot give money directly to non-governmental organizations, but we can work out something with the village to help. Is it possible that they're going to go to a different town? Like my town. There's 2 train stations there. Absolutely, it could happen. But you have to make a decision today. And it certainly seems to me that this is a reasonable accommodation, and certainly it is better to do this on a statewide basis. I just don't know if my good friend Jennifer and all those folks down in Springfield will be able to get this done by the time that the session ends in May. And I'll leave you with one.
30 seconds.
Thank you. One last thought. You know, I hear these people, again, described, and my good friend Lee Goodman knows this. I hear them described as illegals, as depicted as the other, as villains, as criminals. It is not true. They are here seeking asylum, escaping communist oppression. I would think my right-wing friends would be aware of that and could at least acknowledge the fact they're trying to escape oppression. And they're coming here because we're the city on the hill. So I support your decision, and anything I can do and have done with your excellent village manager and this board, I will do.
Good evening. My name is Jeff Head, 12-year Wilmette resident. I wanted to say tonight, I just wanted to thank President Plunkett, Manager Brayman, and Heather. Deborah, thank you, I'm sorry. For the tremendous job that you've all done in facilitating a welcoming environment in a situation that you didn't ask for, that was not an invitation, but a decision made by politicians 1,500 miles away. I want to congratulate the great work that's been done in welcoming these folks. I've observed it close to hand because my wife Meg O'Rourke has been with those welcoming the train, welcoming the buses and getting them on the trains. I've observed several occasions, including tonight when I saw you, President Plunkett, a very orderly situation. People come off the buses 10 minutes before the trains arrive. They're given a small bag with a blanket, a coat, some snacks, and these folks are arriving with literally the clothes on their backs. They're not coming with big bags. They're not coming with small bags. I had more coming back from my office today when I saw the train than almost everybody that was getting off of that bus. And so that we're offering just a small dose of humanity to folks who've literally walked from South America to the Texas border is the least that we can do. If the village manager believes that he needs a little bit of flexibility to deal with this situation, with the expectation, with the convention on the horizon, that more will come in a political move from the governor of Texas, we need to give Mike the tools that he needs to make this as orderly as possible, but continue to provide the welcoming environment that's been done to date. And so thank you all, and thank you all.
I'm Robin Smith, and I've lived in Wilmette for 14 years. And I am just so glad to know that Cook County thinks that you're working with them, because that was my biggest worry. You are elected representatives. You represent everyone. You have way more power than the average citizen. And if you are working with other agencies and with our other governments, and you're actually taking your voice and you're organizing, it's the power. It's grassroots at the government level. And you need to do that, because this ordinance is not enough. It is not going to be effective, and it hurts my heart. And that's the part that bothers me the most. So if you can work with somebody else, get your voices fed. There's got to be a solution overall, but until we actually make it known that we want a solution that works for everyone, nothing is going to change. And it is so unfair to all the people here who are worried and scared, and the people who get off the buses worried and scared. So I do hope that you will take this into consideration and fight it, make it a priority, look at it, and do as much as you can to change the condition of the world. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Michael Lieber. I live at 2035 Hollywood Court in Wilmette, and I've lived in Wilmette for 17 years. And it's wonderful to talk to a board who, indeed, I believe, all lives in Wilmette, despite some confusion. We've heard from a wide range of opinions and a wide spectrum of opinions tonight. I thought I might be batting cleanup, but I guess I'm not quite. I like to refer to myself as kind of a member of the sensible center. And I thank you for your hard work, and I think you have struck a very good balance. I think that there are arguably a couple of tweaks that I would recommend, but I think what you've done with this is a very, very thoughtful approach. And I thank you, and I thank you for your service. There has been a lot of disagreement tonight, but there are certain things we can all agree on. A village of 27,000 people in the northern suburbs of Chicago cannot control any of our borders. It can't control the governor of a state 1,500 miles from here. It can't control whether our own state is going to pass a law during this session before the end of May. So it seems like we need to take a compassionate approach, and I think that's what you've done. By ensuring that anybody who has worked downtown and who's been on the Metro train schedule knows that if you leave after a certain period of time, there's only one train an hour. And people know that if they're stuck at work really, really late, they might miss that last train back to Wilmette. And they know that at certain hours of the night, there are no trains to Chicago. It's wrong and despicable, regardless of how you feel about whether migrants should be brought here, whether they should come. What I think we can all agree on is that it is not right for people to be dropped off at 2:30 in the morning when the next train isn't for 2.5, 3 hours. No place is open to eat. No place is open to use the restroom. It might be inclement weather. That's not right, and it's not fair. The one tweak that I would suggest for you, although I think given it's already been written down, is frankly stronger enforcement for these bus companies. For example, if they show up at an off hour, an impermissible hour, the bus should be impounded. These new coach buses are $750,000.
Speaker has 30 seconds.
$750,000 vehicles, and money talks, and they're going to listen. I think, frankly, the answer is a statewide solution, or at least all of the cities and villages in the Chicago area enacting similar things, so that we can ensure that whether people come or not, they come at times that are good for them and good for the communities and safe for everybody. I thank you for your hard work.
Hello, I'm Lori Goldstein, and I've lived in Wilmette for 30 years. I'm going to be brief because a lot of people have already said, have shared my sentiments, including Michael Rothstein, Jessica Siegel, and John Marshall, among others. I would encourage you to perhaps to do some research about this ordinance to find out what the effect will actually be, if it will stop buses from coming here. I think we've done a marvelous job helping people, and I would hate to see that stop. I have talked to some of the people migrants standing outside of Jewel in the little bit of Spanish that I've been learning, and I've asked how do you feel about this community? How has it treated you? And every single one has commented on how generous the people here are. And that makes me very proud. I think that's the kind of community we want to be. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sanju Matthew. I operate a business in Wilmette at 1837 Wilmette Avenue. It's the new mobile gas station on at the intersection of Ridge and Wilmette. So I live in Glenview, and I've been reading about how Wilmette is handling the bus drop-off situation, and I have to congratulate the village manager, the president, and the board on how nicely you've been handling this. Compassion is a virtue. Okay, we are all blessed. Everybody living in the North Shore is blessed to a point that we should have our compassion levels at the highest. I, as a new business owner in the village, would like to offer that right now I'm not using one of my garages that I have there. So I would like to offer to all the people who are doing this for the immigrants to allow, if the village permits, if the village board permits, to allow storing coat collection stuff in my place. I want to offer this as my support to the village board, who is actually doing a great job of making sure of two things. One, everybody that's dropped off here is transported from here to the city, and at the same time you're balancing your compassion and making sure that all of the residents are safe by making sure that everybody is boarding the train, and making sure that we are showing our compassion and making sure our residents are safe. So I really congratulate the village board, and also I want to, as a new business in the community, I want to offer my support to the people who are volunteering for this. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Barbara Owens. I am a new resident of Wilmette, been here about a year. I don't have a prepared remarks, but I wanted to comment that I work very closely with the Refugee Community Connection, which is a Chicago-based volunteer group, and I'm involved in helping the refugees get settled after they leave shelter. And I can only tell you that these people are wonderful people. And, you know, whether there's a bad one here or there, there might be. But they've gone through a lot, and the resilience that they have shown to get this far and to improve their lives is something that I think is a benefit to our community and to this city and this state. So I, as a new resident, was very proud to see the efforts going on with the buses. I volunteered a couple of times down there. I think that we can differentiate ourselves as a community that is compassionate, and I'm not real fan of being compassionate between 8 and 4:30. I mean, it would be nice if we could do that, but I think, as you've already heard, the governor of Texas doesn't care. He's sending them because he can, and they're not going to arrive at a certain amount of time. They just won't. They'll get diverted somewhere else. And I think that we should be proud of them having compassion when they arrive here. They are cold. They are hungry. They're very hungry. And just to show a little bit of humanity, I think, is what we can do because we have the good fortune to be able to live here.
Hi, good evening. My name is Ayla Kavarin. I'm a new resident to Wilmette. We've been here about a year and a half. I have 2 small children, so I know a lot of people are talking about the parent voice, maybe. And I have to say, we've lived in Colombia, Istanbul, Amsterdam, and we've just moved here to Wilmette. I think my kids have a real global perspective, and they are so proud to talk about what we're doing here in Wilmette to welcome people from other places. They're 6 and they're 9, and they talk to their grandparents on a regular basis, telling them that they're happy we ended up here. So I hope that we, at this point, can say no to this ordinance and keep welcoming people.
Can I look this mic up? Sure. Tall, okay. Hi, this is Pam Ray. I live at 1010 Central. I first became a resident of Wilmette 31 years ago. In reading the fresh Illinois legislation of the Congressional New Arrivals Working Group, it sounds basically like it's find the bus driver and blame Governor Abbott piece of legislation. I'm glad to hear Wilmette has proposed ordinance, but simply saying no arrivals past 4:30 is not a plan, it's a reaction, in my opinion. So I have 8 quick points. Albeit Wilmette is Cook County, the onus needs to be put back on Chicago, and Mayor Brandon Johnson's primary sanctuary city of Illinois. In my opinion, I don't understand why Wilmette needs to be a direct intermediary other than Brandon Johnson saying that it should be. The increasing Wilmette panhandling may also subside when we stop receiving buses here. They can take advantage of services already in Chicago. Welcoming when we really are not equipped to help provide housing and jobs seems disingenuous to me. Goodie bags probably could be provided for eternity. We have very warm-hearted people here, but they could be continued operating from Chicago is my preference. I think we're creating more of a problem just putting a Band-Aid on the situation, inviting problems in a situation where we cannot even be in a position to accept migrants to live here. 5, why are we agreeing to be a processing center light? We can take a person count as migrants get off the bus, but don't even greet them by their names, nor greet them in their native language, which is concerning to me. Things I've noticed, and I have 2 more points and then I'm done. Things I've noticed, doors apparently locking at the metro station, specifically just when migrants' buses seem to be stopping seems discriminatory. Other suburbs on train stops have been quicker to address the migrant situation. Notably, Devil's Advocate board member of Naperville, who courageously asked, who wants to have the immigrants at their homes? He put it out there. Final point, deep breath. I'm all for volunteerism. Goodie bags and fresh clothing can be supplied either in donated money to purchase the actual items themselves for the migrants by by Wilmette residents, or items can be donated and be given to the people who need them, supply them continuously, but all could be done in Chicago. Finally,
30 seconds.
thank you. What I've seen, some immigrants get off the train, go to Starbucks because there were no bathrooms open at Metra, and I saw a young family miss the train going to Chicago with the rest of the bus group. It was very sad. And then likewise, I've seen some of the migrants get into automobile cars from the Texas bus and not even get on the train after they've gotten off the bus. So I'm not clear numbers are being taken or even know who's on the train, if someone's getting sick, if they're going back. Previously, when someone had COVID, they were traced. Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
A quick clarification, is the mural thing, is that a separate public comment, or is that? Yes. Okay, because it looked like it was ahead of the order, or you changed the order here, so. Okay, I'm starting my 3 minutes. Mark Weiermiller, you might follow me on Wilmette Connection on a Facebook page. We've been commenting somewhat on this. I'm somewhat concerned that the village manager is calling these people new arrivals. Seems like we're playing games here. We're calling them migrants. We're calling them new immigrants. We're calling them illegals, illegal aliens, lawbreakers. I don't know if they're not U.S. citizens. And we're kind of like, I'm not sure why Wilmette is being brought into this whole national debate where we're discussing open borders. And I'm not sure why Wilmette has to be part of the whole debate. And why other towns, specifically Chicago, is not welcoming these buses. Seems like some kind of game, and you guys are participating in the game by not allowing them in Chicago, so we're taking them in Wilmette, and then we're doing these goodie bags and doing all this kind of fun stuff. And like you say, the train station is locked as soon as they get here. I don't know if that's because they're concerned about sanitation, about measles. It's all kind of a mystery. So we're looking for more transparency. As far as the panhandling goes, and we've been monitoring this, these people are dropped off. It's a violation of state law 420150 to panhandle with a minor child. And we've asked the Wilmette police to participate and do something on this. Are they going and seeing what's going on? Is there possible trafficking here? Why are these people panhandling? And I blame the village board and the Wilmette police for allowing this. I see people with minor children. We don't know if it's mother and father. They're out there. It's usually a stroller, a male, a female, minor children. And it's just shocking to me. And I think each one of these people should be interviewed, ID'd, maybe Department of Children and Family Services comes in. This is a serious issue. And you guys are worried about buses when we have this going on. I've been to 22 of the migrant centers in Chicago. I've seen especially the one at 2200 South Halsted, where 4,000 people are living now. A child died there. There's drug things going there. There's all kinds of criminal issues. This is a serious issue. I'm not sure why Wilmette is bringing ourselves. I would recommend when a bus comes, they arrest the driver, confiscate the bus, figure out some other way so they are not coming to Wilmette. Because this is, again, I'm not sure why the village is so involved in this. So hopefully you guys will maybe not vote on this ordinance or rewrite it or something to be a little more serious about it. Thank you.
Anybody else like to make a public comment on this issue?
Hi, I'm Maureen Totosian. I've been a Wilmette resident for 30 years. I just have a couple questions on the ordinance. So it's 8 to 4:30, Monday through Friday. But are we restricting the volume of buses? I heard a figure, we're getting 7 buses a week now. The migrants are coming over the border faster and faster. What will we do when it's 7 buses a day or 7 buses an hour? Is Wilmette prepared? Are there enough volunteers? What are we going to do when it's that many buses at a time? Maybe we can manage 7 buses an hour. I'm glad all the volunteers are helping, but I don't think our police forces volunteer. Our taxes are paying them. Again, what are we going to do when the volume keeps going up? Another figure I heard is the buses are going to increase 50% in May and 150% in June. What will we do? I would like to know the plan for handling all these people. Thank you.
Good evening, Yana Nabotovsky. I've been a resident for 16 years.
in Wilmette. I am an immigrant. I came here in 1989. I came here legally. So I think I do have a little bit of a say. And I am going to echo the sentiment that Wilmette is not a sanctuary village. And I don't understand why, as someone else said that, why we're in the middle of this. I also do not understand why Wilmette Police is involved, because I think Wilmette Police is not staffed to do that. I think we have enough issues in the village that Wilmette Police should be taken care of, and I don't know why we should be taking the time away to monitor immigrants and migrants who are coming here. And for those people who are willing to help, I applaud this. I think it's very noble. But I think there are also organizations in Chicago. There's a Refugee One, and I'm sure that's just the first one that comes to mind. There's an organization that deals with Ukrainian refugees that absolutely can use support, can use the money, can use the goodie bag. So for people who are willing to put in the time, it's there. And once again, let's pass the ordinance and let's figure out, what we can do, how we can become not a drop-off point in this.
Right, I think that now concludes public comment. Okay, so we're gonna compile a couple of questions here. I think one of them said what kinds of restrictions other communities have in their ordinances. Mr. Brayman, if you could, I think you.
Sure. The memo that's on page 524 of the agenda packet highlights some of the restrictions that are in the Winnetka, Glencoe, and Highland Park ordinances that are not in the proposed Wilmette ordinances. That includes scheduling times, the bus company scheduling times with the city for specific 30-minute time periods around when trains are arriving, 5 days advance notice and approval through an application process for a bus to come and drop off passengers at their train station, an application form with various information that's needed, including the information of anyone who will be present to meet and receive passengers, a requirement that passengers cannot disembark until a city or village employee is present, and in Glencoe, a licensing fee for intercity buses.
There were questions about a state bill. Believe we ourselves just learned about that. So I'm going to ask you if you know about that, and we could obviously,
Mr. Stein.
So
okay.
I can take that. Yeah, we did. I did become aware of it, I believe, 2 days ago. I did look at the bill. The bill is very similar to our ordinance. It really designates the times in which a bus, an intercity bus, can load and unload, and that's 9 to 5 is what the general parameters are. It does allow both home rule and non-home rule communities to essentially be more restrictive, not less restrictive. So this is a floor, and it does restrict home rule communities from going below. But any other municipality can say they would like a lesser time or a different time of the year, or any other kind of thing that's not already particularly in this bill. Essentially, it gives us the same impoundment rates that's in this village ordinance, the draft before you. But one significant thing that the state can do and a municipality cannot is that it does criminalize the activity of violating the statute to make it a Class A misdemeanor, which is a jailable offense up to 364 days. The village, home rule or non-home rule, does not have the authority to do that to that extent. We only have authority to go up to it's Class B misdemeanor, which is 180 days. And we don't have any criminal ordinances in the village. So those are the main differences, but it is ultimately a very similar set of laws as the draft ordinance before you. It's about the location of where, it's about the type of community, the type of buses that are here, are coming here, the location where they can be loaded and unloaded, the times in which they can be loaded and unloaded, and the penalties if they do violate it. Very similar to our ordinance from a high level perspective. As far as the procedures goes, I believe it was Commissioner Britton mentioned this, that the session does end in May. It is still in the Rules Committee, so it has not even made it to the floor yet. I can't tell you if that's going to change tomorrow or not, but I do know that if it's still in committee, there's still some hurdles to be left at the state legislature to make this an official law.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I just have a follow-up question for Mr. Stein, if that's okay?
Sure.
So is thank you, that was really helpful. So is the expectation that if this is adopted, which the fact that it's still in the Rules Committee is, and the timing is, but if it is, then there would just be consistency among all the communities? Is the expectation or the hope, the desire that that the communities within the state would follow that to some degree?
So I don't have the legislative history, which would explain exactly the hopes.
Okay.
But from the text of the act, it creates a floor for every municipality. However, that doesn't stop other municipalities, whether home rule or non-home rule, to have a different set of laws, and
They can be more higher or less restrictive, or more.
Well, it can be. It cannot be less restrictive. It can be more restrictive.
It can be more restrictive. Okay.
And Trustee Shepherd, did you?
It can be more restrictive, but not less.
I think there was a question about panhandling rules. Mr. Brayman, I know we've answered
Stein
that
can-
before. Okay.
Sure. Take that one. So a couple different issues on panhandling. Panhandling is a protected First Amendment right. There's a federal case that says exactly that. Multiple cases, but there's one that's a local Northern District case that very clearly made the law that prohibited panhandling in the streets and any panhandling unconstitutional. So the Attorney General of the state agreed to that, and that law is no longer in effect because of the First Amendment right. As far as the mention that you cannot panhandle with a child, that is incorrect. The law that has been referenced a few times here is essentially an over 100-year-old law. In it does say that children cannot be employed to beg. It also says that they can't be employed to rope walk, or I think juggling might be one of the other things as well. So it's a very old law, but it's still in effect. So our police chief and I have had multiple conversations, and if there is any activity in which we see that might be violating this law, the police department will engage with the activity and provide education at first, and hopefully everybody will understand what the rules are. But the fact that a child is with somebody that's asking for money is not illegal.
Okay, a couple other things. This ordinance doesn't ban any buses. I think I can answer that. All the trustees and the president live in Wilmette, and we're volunteers. We don't get paid. Any other questions that the trustees thought?
I heard a couple of others.
Okay, sure, trustee.
One was
Kennedy?
whether we are operating as a processing center.
No.
That's what I thought. Another one that I heard was, why does the metro station lock its doors when buses arrive?
That doesn't happen. The doors for many years have locked automatically at certain hours of the day, depending on the season. So overnight during the winter when it's very cold, the station is open 24 hours a day. Right now it locks at 3 p.m. or 3:30 p.m., I think. But if a bus arrives and individuals need to use the restroom facilities because the train may be a while, our police officers unlock the station.
I think I also heard people asking why there are individuals who get off the bus and don't get on the train.
Sure. That's happened here. Generally, a handful of passengers on each bus. They are picked up by friends or family who live in the area, and our police officers generally stay with them and support and assist them until their rides come.
Thanks. And is there a restriction on the number of buses we will allow in Wilmette?
Not in the proposed ordinance.
I think the last one I have that you haven't already addressed is, why do we need police meeting buses in the middle of the night?
I think the simple answer is each drop-off, because that's been orderly, is because the police have been present to work with the bus driver, to work with the security that's on the bus and assist the passengers. When the police have not been able to be present, that's when bus passengers have been dropped, left on their own by the bus driver, unsure where they are in a community or a country or language they don't speak. So our police officers are there in a community caretaking position to support those passengers.
I think you answered every question I heard. So
I have two additional questions that I think came up. So you spoke to this, Mike, but I felt like people still ask this. Can you clarify the process that we're going to use if we adopt this ordinance and the bus company doesn't comply, can you just clarify that one more time? I mean, you talked about the 14-day period. I mean, I think there was some question about, we said May. I mean, I think it'd be clear. I guess it'd be helpful to residents know this is what we're going to do first, then this is what we'll do second, this is what we'll do third.
Sure. So if the ordinance is adopted this evening, we would provide notice to City of Chicago, OEMC, State of Illinois Emergency Management Center, Cook County Emergency Management, as well as Texas Emergency Management, where these buses are originating. So everybody is aware of the timeframes in which buses are allowed to arrive in Wilmette. Over the next 10 to 14 days, we would distribute flyers to the bus drivers and the security personnel on the bus, informing them of the new regulations. Such as we do with any violation of the law, we would give a warning initially, like we did with our leaf blower regulations, as we educate and inform those impacted. After that 10 or 14-day period, we would begin issuing citations to the bus company and to the bus driver based on the number of passengers on the bus. Those would go through our administrative adjudication process and be heard by our court here at the village. And then if that is not effective in stopping buses from coming outside of the permitted hours, we would impound those buses.
Okay, thank you. And then the second thing is just, can you speak to date, what, if any, safety issues we've had as a result of these migrants coming into the community?
We haven't had any.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I think there was another question too. Somebody asked how many buses would have been considered illegal if this were in effect today?
Outside of the 8 a.m.
Yeah.
to 4:30 p.m., about half of the 68 that have come.
About half 68.
Yes.
Thank you.
Another question I think people were asking was, why don't these buses just go directly to Chicago?
Chicago has much more onerous notice provisions and other requirements in their ordinance than we're proposing, similar to what is in Glencoe, Highland Park, and Winnetka. So the buses are avoiding the 5-day notice requirement and other requirements in that fashion.
Can you give an estimate of the communities just in general in the Chicagoland area that have such restrictive ordinances?
In our last conversations with Chicago Emergency Management, it's about 106 communities.
106.
106.
So the comment I heard often made was if they want to come and they can't come during our window, they'll just drop off somewhere else. It sounds to me like that might be unlikely, given what you just said.
There are a number of nearby communities that do not have any regulations in place, so it's possible the buses would go there to drop off.
Communities with Metro stops.
Yes, all the buses have been going to communities with Metro stops.
So it's a possibility.
Yes.
So there are communities with more restrictive provisions, some with none that really match us exactly.
Correct.
And they've been coming here, they've been going either the more restrictive or the no restriction besides us. So we're not sure how it...
That's correct.
However, the bulk of the buses now are either going to Wilmette or Glen Ellen.
Yes.
And that's because it's more attractive for them to do so.
We don't know. We've had discussions with Chicago Emergency Management, Cook County Emergency Management. We've asked the bus drivers why they're predominantly coming to Wilmette and Glen Ellen, and there is no readily available answer to that question.
We ask our own questions?
Yes, so please go ahead, Trustee
Is that
Kennedy.
okay?
Yes.
One question I have is, if we accept a bus at, say, midnight and they get on the last train into Chicago, what happens to them when they get to Chicago?
So Chicago Emergency Management has mandatory overtime where when a bus arrives in Wilmette, we notify Metro Police and Chicago Emergency Management. They will then assign staff to the landing zone to meet those individuals who walk from the Ogilvie Transportation Center to about 25-minute walk to the landing zone. They'll put them on a CTA bus and they'll sit overnight until the regular operating hours begin at the landing zone.
So they don't get any services or anything between the time?
No, they would be provided some food if that's available at the landing zone, and if there's emergency medical care needed, they'd be transported to the hospital.
Any more questions from trustees to staff?
Has there been any overtime required by the police department in order to manage the the current level, and will there be any if we do have a significant increase?
Not at the current level. If there's a significant increase, I don't know the answer to that yet. It depends on the timing, our staffing levels, what the demands are on the department throughout the community. But if that does happen, we would bring that back to the village board, so you're aware.
Would we then be eligible to talk to the Cook County and tap into that fund that they've created?
Yeah, we've started a conversation with Commissioner Britton as well as Cook County Emergency Management about that funding if it's needed. So that would be an opportunity that could potentially be available. To date, no community in Cook County has applied for those grant funds.
That's for Mr. Stein. So if we did decide to adopt this ordinance tonight, and then the state of Illinois was able to adopt an ordinance, is there any reason that we could not modify our current ordinance?
We can modify our current ordinance if the state does or does not.
Okay, so there's nothing limiting. So for several of the residents who indicated, why don't we just wait for the state of Illinois? There's nothing that says that if the state of Illinois does something, we can't make a modification.
That's correct. We would have to make a modification within the rules of the statute,
Okay.
Meaning we can be not less restrictive, but more restrictive. So.
And the same thing, Mr. Stein, if we do adopt this ordinance and something changes in terms of the volume of buses or the restriction or whatever, is there anything that would make us, that we could not change this ordinance again?
No, we can absolutely amend the ordinance as we see fit.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any more questions? Okay. I'm sorry, public comment is closed, so we're not taking any more questions from the audience. I guess we're going to start our discussion. I'm going to go ahead. I appreciate the feedback that we heard this evening. We knew that it would be a crowded room, and we knew that people would have strong feelings all over. We, as a board, as a village, could not have foreseen a situation like the one that we've been faced with. And I think the village and our police department have handled an unexpected and challenging situation with professionalism and compassion. Our role as a board is to ensure that our residents receive effective municipal services, including police services, while treating all persons with dignity and respect. For those reasons, with the information that's available to us right now, I believe this ordinance is reasonable, I believe it's measured, and I believe it's compassionate. I am so grateful for the outpouring of generosity from our community and from the extraordinary efforts of volunteers, as well as our police department, who have managed this with professionalism and care. The limitations on timing of unscheduled drop-offs in this ordinance ensures that our police department can adequately support bus passengers and respond to emergency calls for service, while giving new arrivals a better opportunity to quickly access services offered by the City of Chicago. The policy I'm supporting this evening is intended to assist the Wilmette Police Department so they can continue to preserve the safety of those who live, work, visit, and pass through Wilmette. So I'm going to open it up to see if any board members want to add to that.
Yeah, I'll go. And I think I'm going to risk being a little redundant to what you just said, but I think it's important to comment. And clearly, this is a really unprecedented issue for us. We've heard obviously very divergent points of view. Appreciate people taking the time to come speak to us, the vast majority of which did so in a respectful manner. And, you know, when posed with unique situations, I think it is important that we remember the principles with which we are going to make decisions. And I think these principles are safety for all involved, families and others on the buses, our residents, compassion, resource utilization, and the law. And taking into account these principles, I believe that the proposed ordinance is appropriate and in the collective best interest of all of those involved in our community and those that are coming into it. In addition, and relatedly, again, being somewhat redundant, I do want to thank the residents, many of whom are here tonight, who have stepped up to help out with this issue. I think they too are acting on these principles: safety, compassion, resource utilization, lending a hand so it does not fall all on our public safety teams, who've done an incredible job dealing with the situation. And this has been going on for a few months. I think some people thought our volunteers would peter out, but they continue to organize and show up to provide a little warmth, literally and figuratively, a welcoming hand, and some essentials to ease the journey for those that are on it. So I think that's something we can all be proud of, and I will support this ordinance.
I can say a few words. I first would say we'd be naive sitting up here thinking that this group of 7 people can fix the immigration and migrant issues that are facing our country. I'm not naive thinking that is. I appreciate some of you that wish we could, but there's no doubt in my mind that there's nothing we can do here to fix what's happening at the border in Texas. And we can all have a different opinion on that, and clearly we've heard tonight that all of us have a different opinion on that. So I'm just going to speak to what I think we can do here in Wilmette. I first just want to thank every single trustee who is up here. I want to clarify, we are all residents of this community. We've all been elected by every single one of you sitting in this room. Most of us, I think all of us, have had children who have gone through District 39. I've lived in this community for 25 years. I've brought my kids up in this community, and I'm incredibly passionate about this community. And I think every single person who's up here feels the same way. So for those of you who might feel we aren't speaking for all residents on behalf of Wilmette, I can assure you that every single one of us up here is. And this is a very emotional issue for all of us. I've heard a lot of passion. But we're not up here, our goal is not to eliminate the buses. That's not our goal. We don't know what the outcome's going to be, but that's not our goal. And what I believe personally is having buses come into our community at 2 o'clock in the morning is not safe. That's what I believe. And that's what I believe our police are telling us. It is the role of our police to make our residents safe and to keep our visitors safe. And it's for that reason that I believe putting some restrictions on the hours of when these buses are coming is the right thing to do. I don't know for sure what the right thing to do is here. I don't think any of us know what the right thing to do is here. I can only do what I think the right thing to do is, and I can only take respect from every single one of these trustees who are up here, from our police force, from all the residents who have talked to me tonight, and to President Plunkett and our staff, and our incredible staff who's spending a lot of time on this issue. And so for that reason, I'm going to support this ordinance tonight. I apologize for those of you who wish I would do something different. I appreciate, and I've listened to every single person who spoke tonight, but I believe this is the first step. I would say, I hear that the state of Illinois is looking at this, and I am incredibly grateful that the state of Illinois is looking at this. This is just the first step. If we have to make changes, if we have to make adjustments, I think every one of us up here is also open to that, and so am I. And so if this doesn't pan out exactly how we want, I am confident in our staff, I'm confident in our president, and I'm confident in every single one of us that we will revisit this if we need to. So please have patience with us. Please understand we're trying to do the right thing, and please support what we're trying to do here tonight. Thank you.
As usual, my fellow trustees have made many good points. This one? Okay. I just want to say how proud I am to be on this board and to be in this community, to watch this community react to this unforeseen circumstance, and to see the outpouring of care and compassion within the community. We sit here trying to make the best out of a bad situation. It's certainly a bad situation for the people on these buses who really don't know what's going to be happening, and we're here to help any way we can. I believe that this ordinance is humane, compassionate, but also responsible to the village of Wilmette, to the employees of Wilmette, to the police of Wilmette, and I strongly support this ordinance because it is the best that we can do with the information that we have. And it does open the opportunity for us to react when we have more information and make better decisions at that time. So I will absolutely support this ordinance, and I'm very proud of this work that has been done.
I feel very much like my fellow trustees. I'm extremely, as both as a board member and as a resident of over 30 years, actually over 40 years, who has had small children and still cares about small children and still remembers what it's like to have small children and to worry about their safety. Yes, I am still young enough to remember what it's like to have small children. I I love the fact that our community has been open and has been warm-hearted and has done so much to volunteer and make people who have come to us in great need of compassion, in great need of assistance, and that we've been able to provide it. And I don't want to be an unwelcoming community. And I don't think that this proposed ordinance makes us unwelcoming, but we do have some concerns about, I have concerns at least, about this, and I think others do too, about the safety of the migrants who come in the middle of the night. In at least one case, they were dropped off by the bus on a very cold night and left to wander around the village at a time when the police did not know they were going to arrive and when the metro station was locked. I know that the weather's getting warmer, but it's not going to stay warmer. And there will be times when the weather is very inclement. And this will continue to happen if we allow buses to come in the middle of the night. And that's not safe for the people on the bus. And it's not kind and generous to them. So if those buses get diverted to another community, I don't know what to say about how they'll be received there. But we cannot... I can't in good conscience think that we're doing the best for them if we allow buses, if we can't stop buses from coming in the middle of the night and dropping people off just to fend for themselves. That doesn't seem right. So my main reason for supporting this ordinance is because of the safety of the migrants and not necessarily concerned about the community, because I don't think the community is in danger by these buses. We haven't had any incidents that have caused concern. We haven't had any crime caused by the migrants in the times that they're here. These people just need our compassion and our help, and we try to provide it as best we can, and we're lucky to have wonderful volunteers and a wonderful police department that offer that assistance and support.
I would also say, in support of the work that we've done here in Wilmette, I am just infinitely proud of the volunteers, the community, the churches, the middle schools, the high schools, everyone that has come together to donate, put some time in, commit to this very, very challenging situation. I think it was already stated that we all kind of come from three groups. We've all been a migrant or immigrant or a slave of some type, and we've been brought here. But we were brought here, but the welcoming of the United States, the welcoming that we're showing this particular group here is just a model. I find it remarkable that the legislation that is starting is very similar to the work that we've kind of put forth here. So I would say Wilmette strong from the example of bringing different community groups together in a partnership on this situation with both community, municipal efforts coming together. And I think this is just to make sure that we can have an efficient and effective environment that we can have these buses come into, that they can get to a distribution center in a timely fashion so that it is not lost time either getting to Chicago and putting on a warming bus or on some temporary, but they can get there, get processed, get vaccinated, and then move on in that journey. They have all traveled pretty long distances. So if we can just make sure that as they get here, they can get here at a reasonable and effective time so that they can get to that next point in their journey. And so for those reasons, I'm extremely supportive of this ordinance.
We've heard from everybody, and this has been moved and seconded. So would the clerk please call the roll on the motion?
Trustee Dodd.
Aye.
Trustee Shepard.
Aye.
Trustee Smith.
Aye.
Trustee Leonard.
Aye.
Trustee Kennedy.
Aye.
And President Plunkett.
Aye. The ordinance has been approved. Thank you all for your time. The next issue that we are discussing is the mural in Veterans Park. So I'll give a few minutes for people who want to leave before we go on to the next.
So did you.
Mike said take it after the mural. Yeah. Okay, we're gonna move along. We still have a lot of meeting to cover tonight. I'm gonna turn it over to the Administration Committee, Trustee Smith.
I have a motion for 5.31, adoption of resolution number 2024-R-54, authorizing the village manager to execute a contract in the amount not to exceed $38,000 with City to City LLC of Chicago, Illinois, for mural design and installation at Veterans Park.
Was that the motion?
That is the motion.
Okay.
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Trustee Shepherd, it's been moved and seconded. Mr. Brayman?
Yes, a very brief overview of this contract that's before the board this evening. This is the fourth time this item has been in front of the village board since September of 2023. The board's previously discussed and supported the concept of a mural in Veterans Park, and then created an ad hoc committee of resident volunteers to help shepherd us through the process of selecting a muralist and the concept design for the artwork. The committee has met 3 times since January 8th of this year. They solicited requests for qualifications from artists throughout the area and even throughout the country. We received 23 submittals from really highly qualified artists. The committee reviewed those submittals in public meetings, took public feedback, identified 4 finalists that they brought in for interviews in a public forum, and has selected and recommended to the village board to commission Luis Ramirez to paint the mural at Veterans Park. This mural would be fully funded by community donations, large part from donations solicited from the village's sesquicentennial celebration, which were intended for some type of public improvement, public artwork project, as well as from the Wilmette Rotary Club. And we thank all the donors in the Rotary Club for their support of this project. So this step tonight is for the village board to approve a contract in the amount of $38,000 with Mr. Ramirez, who's recommended by the committee. The committee is scheduled to meet with Mr. Ramirez tomorrow to review his initial concept designs, provide feedback, and then they'll meet with him again as they work together jointly with the artist to produce artwork that can then be installed later this summer.
Any questions from the trustees for Mr. Brayman on this?
I have a question.
Yes.
Just regarding the mechanics here, you say that the community donations are funding this, yet we're approving a contract for $38,000. Can you just be more clear of how the monies will flow and how that works?
Sure. So the village has taken in a bulk of those donations already, and we hold them in our general fund reserve account. And then we are contracting with the artist and paying the artist. And anytime we as the village are spending public funds, if it's over $25,000, the village board has to approve that expenditure no matter where those funds come.
Got it. Thank
So even though they're donations that were made to us for use like this,
yes,
we still have to.
Legally, you have to authorize that expenditure.
Even though, okay, thank you.
I think I just want to clarify, we had some emails come in about the process and how this works. In terms of the brick wall, should we ever in the future decide to go back to the brick? Is that possible with this process?
Yes, we've reviewed the possibilities with Mr. Ramirez in terms of how, if we wanted to change the artwork in the future, we could cover it up with an oil-based primer and paint over it. He's able to touch up, or another artist is able to touch up if there's a problem with the artwork over time. And Mr. Ramirez has confirmed with the vendors he uses for his paint products that they can be removed, including the base layer of primer and the brick restored if the village ever so chooses.
Right. Mr. Smith?
I'd
Or
like
Trustee
to.
Smith?
I like to put on the record that I want to commend that ad hoc committee for meeting, coming together, and doing the work to go through this whole selection process. This is again a great example of how the community will come together and individuals will work for the betterment and the improvement of Wilmette. And I think this piece of art will be something that will be very special, that we will all take in and appreciate over the years. Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no more questions from trustees, I will now open this up to public comment. And just as we went through the last time, everybody who comes up for public comment, please state your name and where you live. And we're going to also be limited to 3 minutes. Are there people here who would like to speak on this? Please come up.
I'm still George Pierce.
Still?
I fully support this. I think, as you know, I was on the Sesquicentennial Committee. One of the first places we looked at for doing a public improvement project was this area. And we really did not come up with a specific project, and eventually it wound up being the alley, which is awesome. But I just think it's great that this has evolved to where it is, and I fully support it. And also the Rotary Club I'm in is also supporting it. So, thank you.
I'm Mark Wire-Miller, Wilmette resident. I've, again, in Wilmette Connection, another place, we've had a huge discussion about this mural project. That we're calling it the $40,000 fiasco. We're not sure why they're using Wilmette funds. I understand it's donated. I'm not sure if they were donated specifically for a mural at Veterans Park. One issue right off the bat, I'd like to see a picture of the mural right now, because it sounds like the guy, whoever's going to get it, is going to be a blank check. What exactly are they going to paint there? And I've asked a lot of people about this, and no one really knows. I've seen quite a few murals in Chicago. A lot of them are being done on plywood now and attached to the wall. If you talk to people, I'm not sure what you're talking about, oil-based paint. You don't paint a brick building that's never been painted. That building's about 100 years old. You just don't paint brick buildings. It's a very odd thing to do. That building hasn't been painted in 100 years. It damages the, just Google it, it damages the brick. It's just not something you should do. There are issues with I understand it's art. Some people consider it graffiti. Not everybody's art, not everyone agrees on what art and what good art is and everything. I'm not sure why the Village Board is obsessed with doing this at Veterans Park. I'm not sure why veterans aren't doing it. Why aren't we devoting this money towards veterans? Post 42 American Legion in Evanston is doing a lot of work with veterans. They have a Monday night dinner every night. I'm involved with that group. I mean, I'm not sure how a mural is going to help us with the Veterans Park. Again, it's $40,000. I was the only person at the ad hoc meeting last time, which is kind of interesting. I just heard about it. Ideally, this project would go through historic, one of your 17 different commissions, historic, appearance review, zoning. Again, I'm not sure what it looks like. Is it going to be something appropriate? Is it going to be something that might offend people? Again, I would hope maybe you would table this and review, especially doing it on plywood or some other surface that can be attached and not damage the brick. If you're going to spend also $40,000, every time I mention it, people are like, $40,000 for a mural? It seems pretty outrageous. So ideally, you guys don't vote on this tonight and reevaluate it. And if it does go through, hopefully you can maybe do it on plywood or have some. I didn't look at the contract. I don't know if it's online.
Speaker has 30 seconds.
But that's it. 2.5 minutes. I'll cut it short. Thanks a lot.
Hi again, I'm Pam Rail, 1010 Central, and I love murals. I love cities, and every chance I get, when I go to a city, that's what I look for, and you really can tell the character of a city by looking at its murals. I would hope if it is going to be in the place where everyone's saying it's going to be, like right next to Eva Jeans, if that's how you pronounce that restaurant, that maybe they could get like first right of refusal because they just put all those brand new windows in there, that I would hope that they could at least, or I'm sure that they can have input, but that it would be fit into character with what they've done in there. They've done a beautiful job with the restaurant, the exterior of the restaurant. And primary for me would be to use I know it was put in place because of centennial money, but to use a veterans theme would just be so, would be wonderful. I do see like murals popping up elsewhere, like Sears School, like it's pretty cool. And then in Evanston, they're all over. But I think it's a great opportunity, but it's, I guess, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. Like, so I guess we'll just see, but it's kind of a fascinating project. So thank you for letting me speak. Bye.
Anyone else like to make a comment? Okay, anyone on the board have any comments on this?
I'd just like to thank the Rotary Club, particularly, and all the generous donors to the Sesquicentennial Fund that made this possible. Without that money, we probably wouldn't be spending $38,000. But those donations were made to us for a purpose like this, and the Rotary is specifically for this purpose and only this purpose. And I'm glad that we're able to use it in a wonderful way like this.
And I think I do want to just clarify, Mr. Brayman, the mural design has not been chosen yet, but the committee will review it.
Correct.
Yeah, I'll also say I think it was a great idea. 2 years ago, we got together to celebrate the 150th. I see people here who were very involved with that, and the idea of leaving some lasting beautification efforts within the village, I think, is quite commendable. Wilmette Way, obviously, is part of that, tree plantings and such, and I think this is another great way to do it. It's been done with a lot of community input from the beginning, which has been great in terms of Sesquicentenary Committee, the Rotarians, thank you very much for their donations, and I think creating interesting things in our village that make it stand out, that draw people in, I think is investments in the village, and I think that is a good thing to do, and one to hopefully continue to foster the vibrancy that we've been enjoying over the last few years here.
Anybody else want to comment? I just have to say, we took applications for residents who wanted to volunteer to be on the ad hoc mural committee, and I've never had more applications for any commission of the village board, and it was people with fantastic qualifications and so hard to say no, but obviously, showed the level of interest and excitement in this. I think it'll add even more vibrancy to our downtown, and I know our businesses are excited because it'll bring more people to downtown Wilmette and to enjoy our businesses. So I think it's a win-win. So, okay. So there's been a motion and a second. Could the clerk please call the roll on the motion?
Trustee Dodd.
Aye.
Trustee Shepard.
Aye.
Trustee Smith.
Aye.
Trustee Leonard.
Aye.
Trustee Kennedy.
Aye.
And President Plunkett.
Aye. Motion approved. So look forward to some exciting times ahead. I think now we're going to take a small break here because we do have 2 more items to go through on our agenda, but we might need a short little break.
Still got alleys.
middle of this political thing. Ready?
I think so. Let's go. I'd rather just go so that we can get home.
I see it.
That's okay.
All right, moving on. Finance Committee, Trustee Shepherd.
Yes, we are going to have a presentation on the fiscal year 2023 financial report. Yeah, I think I'm handing it off to Mr. Roy.
Should be up.
And we're going to pull up the presentation right now, and I believe Mike is going to start for us.
Nice to start.
All right. Again, as we've had for the past several years with our financial presentations, it's good news. We're in a really strong financial position. It gives us a lot of flexibility as we move forward. We have more in our reserves than we had projected at the end of the budget. That's something that we want to bring to the Finance Committee early this summer, likely June, to discuss. It gives us opportunities that we may not have had a few years ago to think about how to spend those reserves in impactful ways on large projects such as the police station or our Lake Avenue reconstruction project, which has a large match for grant proceeds, or transfers to the water fund for the lead service line replacement requirements. So we have a lot of opportunities ahead of us to have further discussions, and I look forward to Melinda and Eric walking us through the financials.
So this summary slide here is showing you that the revenues outperformed our budget expectations. Expenses came in under. I'm going to talk a little bit more in detail about the revenues, and then Eric is going to share some more perspective on the expenses. So as we go to this next slide, on property taxes, as it indicates here, the levy between 2022 to 2023 declined, but our property tax collections were actually underperformed our budget. A lot of this has to do with, as we've talked about before in the past, the timing of the property tax bills and when they came through. Remember last year, the timing of the bill was December 1st. So although we were slightly under in those revenue collections, we will make that up in the following fiscal year. Income tax has overperformed the budget by about $245,000. You'll remember we've talked about this before in the past per IML. It has to do with strong corporate earnings and a strong labor market. In our next slide here, the sales tax. We've talked about this throughout the year. It was performing better than we expected, but really I would have to say it was the consumer performed better than what we expected, and then inflation was the other part of it. And really, in my mind, if we look at the right side of this slide, the home rule sales tax is showing you that the consumer spent in a way that we had expected, but it was slightly above, and that's really the impact of inflation over time. In our next slide, real estate transfer tax, this is a revenue that has outperformed for several years. We all know what was happening in the stock market. Transactions were up, home sales started to go up in terms of prices, but in 2023, the number of transactions declined. However, the prices have still gone up, but not enough to offset that. So we had anticipated that as the year was going on. If we look at building permits, this is one of the revenues that definitely performed strong for us during the year, and it really is in the one-time revenues. We had the $621,000 permit for Wayfair, about $360,000 for Eden's Plaza, and then we had 7 large residential permits. So this particular revenue source is really one of the underpinning reasons why we were $3.some million above our budget expectations. So building permits is one. As we go to the next slide, we're really going to see the other 2 major components that drove that. One is the sale of the depot for $1 million, and the other is really interest earnings. So if you think back just a year ago, interest rates were not performing anywhere close to where they are right now. So we are still earning over 5% in our reserves that we have. if you can think back to 2022, we were at times a basis point. 10 basis points was great, then it was 25 basis points. So a huge difference that has happened in over a year. It's those three items that really drove what we saw is the overperformance in our revenue compared to budget. Utility taxes, this is one that performed pretty close to expectations. However, the electricity tax was slightly under. And now Eric is going to talk to us more about the expense performance.
Right, so as we look at the general fund expenditures, they similarly track to what we'll see in the water fund and the sewer fund as well, where we look at our core operational services associated with contractual services, personnel, in the general fund's case, refuse, and commodity costs. And when we look at those operational expenses, we see that we align fairly closely to our budgetary expectations. But when we look at that overall 5% that we came in under budget, about $2 million, a lot of that was really driven by capital. So capital and contingency made up about $1.6 million of that $2.1 million that we came in under budget. Those under budget on the capital side, and we'll go into a little bit more detail, was caused by deferrals, savings. But overall, when we looked at that core operations, we performed fairly close to our expectations. So as we look at regular wages, when we projected out during the 2023 budgetary process, we expected to see our wages go up in that 3.5% to 4% range. We fell within that target. So we were down comparatively to budget, but you can see that year-over-year growth that we see on that recurring costs. On the overtime wages, we were down comparatively to 2022, but we are still higher than performing than we have in some of those prior years. And what we're seeing in those areas is hiring lag when we look at our public safety for police and fire, and we have to offset some of those costs with our overtime wages. But as we continue to get fully staffed in those areas, we have started to see the overtime wage decline. In fact, as we look toward the latter quarter of 2023, we saw a reversal of that trend where overtime wages fell because our regular wages were rising again as we were fully staffed. The next two for refuse and contractual services are just really to show, like, when we look at these core operational services, we're about as spot on as we can possibly be from a budget perspective. When we looked at commodities, we're up comparatively to our budget and to 2022, and that's really a product of inflation. As we see prices increase in fuel and materials, we start to see an impact on the overall budget. And then when we looked at overall expenses, which includes some reimbursements and other items, we were slightly below budget, but again, kind of in line with our overall expectations. We see being within that 1% to 3% range kind of be hitting our target. The area where we saw the broadest savings was within our capital expenditures areas. So the two charts here are really to denote two different components. The first is to show that since 2018, and quite frankly, prior to that, we have spent more on capital expenditures in 2023 than we have ever previously. We've had an aggressive capital maintenance program for roads, alleys, and everything else within the general fund, and we continue to spend at an aggressive pace. But despite that continued aggressive spending, we still did not meet what our budgetary expectations were. So we were actually about we came in about $1.4 million under budget. And we've outlined here where those significant changes were. So despite the village board's efforts to spend additional dollars on capital for alleys in Old Glenview Road that were approved as part of 2023, we still did see capital deferrals. So that included engineering work, building improvements, bike plan implementation, and then one that's a little bit unique is the Skokie Lake intersection, which is in the $470,000 range. That work's completed. However, we have not received the bill from the state, so we have to carry those expenses into future years. And then we look at some other projects for capital savings, one of them specifically being Wilmette Avenue. During 2023, we received additional grant funds, and so therefore our expectations when we developed the 2023 budget, came in under because we received additional revenues to support that project. So I'm going to turn it back over to Melinda to go through the water fund.
So here we're going to see that again, we outperformed our budget on a revenue basis, just shy of $1 million, and then our expenses came in just about $1 million underneath budget. So the first thing that we're going to look at with the water fund is how did we perform with the wholesale customers and how did our residential do? And in both cases, you're going to see that we were, as the term Eric used before, pretty much spot on. So it performed fairly close to expectations. So that's not what is causing the roughly $1 million that we were over budget. So if we go to the next slide, this is really going to inform us in terms of what happened. So we received a one-time revenue for a PCB settlement case that was the $367,000 that you see noted there. So that's the one component. The other piece of it, and it's going to be a familiar story, interest income. So the balance that we have sitting in the water fund earned much more interest than we ever could have projected when we were putting the budget together for 2023.
So again, a very similar story when we're looking at the water fund expenditures. When we look at our core expenses associated with personnel, debt service, capital, and for the most part contractual services, we were in line with what our expectations were to provide those base level services. Now, when we looked at some of the other categories here, so other expenditures, here was a village board made the decision towards the latter part of last year to reduce our transfer from the water fund into the general fund to help continue to build balances for the upcoming water capital expenditures that we're going to have. And then again, when we looked at capital outlay, we were about 60% under budget, but we've kind of outlined here what those deferrals were. So vehicle purchases was in the $190,000 range, $170,000 for valve installations, high lift pumps. And then when we looked at contractual services, that was another project deferral. And these have all moved into the 2024 budget. So again, similar looking at the sewer fund overall, our revenues came in close to our expectations and our expenditures were under budget, and we'll go into that as far as the capital expenses. So sewer fund revenues are based upon water consumption. Because our residential water revenues hit our targeted expectations, our sewer fund revenues are going to match that and meet our expectations. So you can see kind of the consistency with where we've been over the last several years. Then again, when we look at the expenditure side, we're under by about 22%, but you can see from the chart that the major driver of that is on the capital side. And those deferrals included sewer main repairs, dump truck, and then another example here was the Maple Avenue outfall. We bid that project out in 2023. The pricing came in significantly higher than our engineers' estimates. We made the decision to push that out into 2024 where we saw better pricing that we felt was more appropriate and in line with our expectations. So as we look at the stormwater revenue, again, here we came about as close as we could have on the revenue side as well as the expense projection side. From an overall perspective, our annual average homeowner bill is $215. That remained consistent from 2022 into 2023. And then when we looked at the expenditures, the primary expense in this area is related to debt service. And so overall, we were fairly aligned with what our budget expectations were. So when we look at these four main categories, the general fund, the water fund, the sewer fund, and our stormwater utility, we pulled all those numbers down into the reserve analysis. And I know there's a lot of information that's on this chart, but the core takeaway here is when we're looking at our budgeted year-end balance comparatively to our projected year-end balance. So when we looked at the general fund, for example, we expected to draw down reserves to around $17 million. But based upon that positive revenue performance combined with some underspend on the capital side, our balances actually grew to $23 million. So at the end of the day, right now we're around $11 million over our target. There's some other factors that we have to consider. So earlier I mentioned the
billing that's outstanding on Skokie Lake Avenue. If we have to pull that roughly $500,000 back, because we'll expect to spend that at some point in either 2024, 2025, or beyond based upon the state. So we kind of have to keep that in mind as we're looking out. But again, we know that we have, as Mike alluded to earlier, we have broad capital needs across all of our operating funds, and these reserves give us the capacity to deal with those upcoming capital. They give us flexibility in how we manage those future capital needs, whether it's on the water treatment side, sewer improvements, or general fund side, looking at options for different projects. The last piece of analysis that we included in here is providing a comparison between what we presented to the village board as part of the budgetary process. So the information that's on that first row for the reserve projection shows what was included in the budget. So this was based upon 8 months of actuals and then our 4 months of expectations that we expected through the latter part of the year. So what we see in that reserve analysis is a significant change on the general fund side, where reserves went up $3 million compared to what we thought during the September timeframe. And below, we've outlined what those changes are. So revenue increases of roughly $1.2 million, and then expenditure decreases of around $1.9 million. And that $1.9 million is consistent of $1.2 million in capital savings and deferrals, around $400,000 in personnel, and then additional savings on the contingency side. So those contingency savings are really based upon better performance in other funds, whether it's our debt service fund or our parking meter fund, where we were required to make transfers to make those funds whole. So in the past several years, as ridership has declined at the metro station, we've had to fill some of those revenue holes with a transfer from the general fund. But as we saw ridership continue to improve in 2023, we didn't need that fund transfer, wasn't necessarily required. And then when we look at the water fund side and the sewer fund side, again, just kind of a rehashing of that theme where we had capital project deferrals, around $220,000 on the water fund side and just over $500,000 on the sewer fund side.
Eric, can you go back to the previous slide?
Yep.
Put my mic on. So one additional thing we want the Finance Committee to discuss this summer is whether minor amendments to our reserve policy would make sense. You know, an example is if we cross that 30% threshold by a certain amount, like we are in the general fund or the water fund, should there be automatic transfers that we're making into our general fund capital program or our water fund capital program to ensure that those dollars are being spent on one-time long-term expenses? That money, that would still be acceptable to Moody's from a bond rating perspective, but it would help, I think, maintain, responsibility is not the right word, but ensuring that those reserve funds are not spent on recurring expenses, but also making sure that we're spending those down on those capital needs, which we know are significant coming up in the next 2 to 15 or 20 years.
And the last piece that we wanted to give an update on, then I'll turn it over to Melinda, was on pensions.
So today, one of the items that you voted on was the Police and Fire Pension Fund, the report from the actuaries. And you'll remember during our budget discussions, we talked quite a bit about this and some of the assumptions that we had put in place in terms of how we would create the levy for 2024. So in doing all of that, we ended up increasing our levy, if you might remember, for 2024. But as we're getting the 2023 results in, and that informs the movement that we make or not have to make, but it has to, wow, it's getting late for me, so I apologize.
It's okay.
It performed in a way that ultimately we were expecting. So the actuary reports and what you're going to see here is that back in 2020 is really when we put in place our phase-in for the 15-year rolling amortization. So you're going to start to see the improvement that we had in the funding levels in both the police and the fire, and then you see the combined line. If you recall, in 2022, the market tanked. We are going to see the effects of that over the next several years, because in 2023 we put in place a 5-year smoothing, not a 3-year. So it's going to be something that, again, is going to be mitigated in terms of the impact, but we are going to feel that over the next several years. So we knew when we were having these budgetary discussions that we expected to see our funding levels come down, and they just did slightly. But we also saw some positive performance that happened at the end of 2023 that, again, is going to help mitigate slightly, ever so slightly, the negative results that we had for 2022. And that was our good story.
I have a question. I know you've been trying to move the audit process up. How is that to earlier in the year than it was 2 years ago? How's that working?
So thanks for asking that question, because I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the work that Olga, our Assistant Finance Director, what she's doing. It has been great to have her on board. So in being able to tell you tonight about the results for the actuary report, that's a month sooner than we were able to come to you last year. We are actually, the audit process is moving along very smoothly. I'm hoping to get a draft from them within the next week or so. And if that's the case, if everything else continues to go as I would like to see it, we'll be coming back to schedule a meeting with the Finance Committee with the results at the end of May, and then coming to the board with the presentation of the audit in June. And that, again, will be almost 2 months sooner than we were able to get things done last year. Again, because of resources problems that we're having. But Olga's been a phenomenal addition to the team, so I'm thrilled.
Any questions for Ms. Malloy? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pretty impressive news, so thank you.
Great. Thanks.
Very clear presentation.
Okay, moving on, we will now turn it over to Trustee Kennedy, Municipal Services Committee.
Yes, there's only one thing on the agenda tonight from this, the adoption of resolution number 2024-R-61, authorizing the village manager to execute a contract in the amount not to exceed $2,436,293 with Schroeder and Schroeder, Inc., Skokie, Illinois, for the 2024 Alley and Brick Street Reconstruction Program.
So that was a motion?
That was a motion.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Trustee Smith. So we're turning this over to...
Dan's going to come on up and present on the alleys. Just as a background and a refresher, this is partly a continuation of the board's discussion at our last meeting on our road program. If you recall, we approved an alternative on that road program, which is 15th Street from Isabella to Wilmette Avenue, with the idea that we'd come back and revisit that approval when we had the alley bids in place. There's a cover memo in the packet that lays out options. It's going to be discussed in the presentation tonight in terms of how we want to award both contracts. If we decide to pull back on the roads and not do 15th Street, we'll take that direction tonight, and then we'd simply put a resolution on the next meeting affirming that, so there's a vote on it. The most important thing tonight is that we need to make decisions on both programs so that we can successfully implement our Alley and Brick Street program and our road program this year.
All right. Good evening, President Plunkett, members of the board. I'm here tonight to talk about the roads and alleys since they represent a large component of the village's infrastructure investment program. It's worth noting that 2024 marked the first year of a budgeted accelerated alley replacement schedule of 6 alleys per year. Alleys are rated very similar to roadways by quantifying defects, assigning a condition rating, and then placing segments in condition categories. As you can see, even after 2024 construction, it'll still take several years to address all alleys in the very poor condition category. The next set of slides display alleys in this year's program, all in the very poor condition category. So here are 2 alleys. In the previous slide included another for 3 alleys in the base bid. another alley in very poor condition for the 4th alley, the 5th alley at Central and 16th in very poor condition, here at Isabella and 16th, so that makes 6 alleys. And then the alley at Highland and Ridge is the optional alley segment. It is a long alley. It is equivalent in size to 2 typical alleys, and there is a noticeable difference in the condition from the west half to the east half. While the pricing in alley construction did increase significantly, we are satisfied with the bid results considering how sensitive this program is to increases in concrete construction materials. The table on the right demonstrates that even at the accelerated replacement rate of 6 alleys per year, we're going to continue to have a large number of alleys in the very poor condition category. The brick programs did not see increases as high as the other programs. That's because these programs are very labor intensive and not as sensitive to the other programs and increases in construction materials. Due to demands on the alley program, staff is presenting a recommendation to include 1 additional alley with the award. This is the east half of the optional double alley. For the road program, staff is seeking a decision on the alternate street location, which is 15th Street from Isabella to Wilmette. It's a 3-block stretch that was rated on the low end of the very poor condition category in 2022. And it's expected to be rated in the high end of the serious condition category when reevaluated next year. If it's determined that the street is deferred until next year, Public Works crews will complete asphalt patching in the areas that have the most significant defects. Here are some examples of the areas that could be addressed by Public Works crews by asphalt patching. So there are various impacts to the reserve depending on the award options selected. For example, the staff recommendation highlighted in red does not award the optional street segment. It does include 1 additional alley segment for a total reserve draw of over $400,000. Alternatively, in blue is an award option to include the optional street segment and the 1 additional alley for nearly $800,000 in a reserve impact.
Dan, if you can go back to that slide.
Yeah.
Just to clarify for the board, those reserve drawdowns are in addition to what we've planned in the budget. So we're already planning to use reserves to offset property tax increases by $500,000 and other reserve uses in the engineering program. So this is unplanned further drawdown of reserves from $200,000 to $1 million.
So the total drawdown, if you just take the base bid, is $700,000. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
But 500 of that is already factored into our
in.
budget and assumptions.
Well, I'll start with a question. Okay. Mr. Manis, I think you explained this fairly clearly last time, but kind of, the historical purpose of us bidding for an alternate. I mean, how long have we done this, and what was kind of the rationale behind doing that?
Yes, good question. For several years, there were bid alternates that were included intentionally with the bid to provide an option to draw down on reserves. This year marked a kind of return to the more standard use of a bid alternate, which allows the village board to award to the budget if the base award came in under budget. So we weren't intentionally, we wanted to provide flexibility, but in the event the bids came in lower than the estimates or below budget, we at least had that option to award additional locations to allow us to spend the budget.
And there was a time that used to actually happen, right? Several years ago, we weren't spending the full program, and it was based on feedback from the board asking us to bid out more so that we could at least get to the budget. So that's the intended purpose of that, and times have changed.
And then could you explain at least the staff recommendation? It's obviously over budget on both the road and the alley, but the recommendation to do that half of the alley as opposed to the road.
We feel like there's a larger need with the alley network. We by far get a higher number of calls regarding alley conditions from our residents. And then just based on the number of alleys in the very poor condition category, and as you can see from the photos, they are in need of immediate replacement. And so if any way we can accelerate the program, if there's a desire to spend down our reserves, that would be our recommendation.
And the alley bids weren't as inflated as the road bids, is that correct?
Kind of. So the overall increase in pricing was a little bit higher with alleys, but when you factor in the proportion of concrete involved in an alley program versus a road program, we consider the pricing to be good.
Any questions on this? We obviously have a couple decision points to make tonight. Okay, anyone want to go ahead and give your thoughts?
I can start if you want.
Sure.
I'm a little concerned about our sort of basic assumptions on the road program. When I came on the board, in 2019, the average condition of the streets was poor. It was at 57, and it had declined rapidly in the preceding years. And as I recall, the idea was that we would ramp up spending to get it eventually to good again, which is where it had been in previous years. And we would do that by a certain amount of spending now, and then when 2026 came around and there was this sort of debt service hole, we would use the additional funds or that sort of cushion to ramp up spending in 2026 so that we could go back up to good. And so what we're seeing now in the road program is we've made a lot of progress since 2018. We went from 57 to 67, so we're kind of the mid-fare range. But then we're going to stall out, basically, and we have kind of stalled out, and we're not going to change much until that next bump up in spending, which won't occur until 2026. And that all sounded very reasonable, and I thought that was a very good way to deal with this. Since that happened, though, we've filled in that debt service hole already with probable spending on the police department, on the lead pipe remediation. It's probably going to take it all up. So I'm not sure that there's going to be any extra room in that debt service cushion come 2026. And if that's the case, then unless we do something about increasing road spending, we're just going to keep plateauing it at fair. Does that make sense? And that is not our original intention, and I don't think that is really what we want as a village. I don't think we want to have just barely fair roads as our general condition, and that's not consistent with our neighbors. So I'm a little concerned about how this is all playing out with, well, we're going to have this cushion in 2026, but suddenly that cushion looks like it's already kind of spent for other purposes. And I don't want to see a big increase in taxes to keep this program going. So my sort of assumption at this time is that it might be wise, while we've got a big reserve fund, and while we've got some projects that can be done without a huge hole being made in the debt by any means in the debt reserve, in the general reserve fund, to do a little extra spending instead of waiting until 2026 and finding out, oops, we're just out of money, or we have to raise taxes much more than we want to in 2026. So if I had my druthers, it would be the the one that's highlighted in blue, which would be adding the 15th Street and then some of the additional alley programs, but not so bad half of the long alley. And if my calculations are right about the reserve fund, that would be an additional $800,000. I think. Yeah, $799. And that would mean that the reserve fund would be down to $22.28 million, which is still 52% of our expenditure budget in 2024. So we're not exactly making a big hole in it, but at least we're keeping the road program going without waiting for 2026 and then finding out, oops, we're out of money.
I agree with you, Trustee Kennedy, that I think we need to reevaluate our funding source for the road program, and I think we need to obviously do this before 2026. I think we have opportunities with potentially greatly increased sales tax revenue with Wayfair coming in, with Plaza del Lago, with Eden's Plaza. But I think that we need to evaluate this overall. And I understand our reserves are higher. I'm uncomfortable personally spending that much on roads this year solely without looking at the bigger picture. I think when we have our budget discussions, we can kind of look at all of the needs at once of our village. And so I would be more inclined to do the staff recommendation of the orange, because I would rather have this discussion in a larger budget discussion, and also reevaluating our spending plan for roads going forward. Because I agree, we've made great progress on our roads. We certainly don't want to stall there, but I guess I would be in favor of evaluating the entire thing. I'm looking forward to hearing other trustees.
You know, I came in here, and I still am favoring orange, the 421. I think Trustee Kennedy brought up some really interesting points, but the decision now, I mean, at some point, the rubber's going to hit the road, and we're going to have to make these budgetary decisions, and we do know these big capital projects are coming. Right. That's a certainty, and, you know, however we can get a little bit ahead of those. And, you know, as was discussed during the finance presentation, that's going to be lower debt issuance in the future for those right now. So, but, you know, we'll have to go through the whole process and understand it. I am curious how much increased spending is in the assumptions for the chart continuing to go up. I don't know if that's something you have off the top of your head. No. But, you know, our chart that's presented to us, it does continue to go.
It wasn't at the level we're seeing, right?
Okay.
Our projections for inflation, I think we're 3 to 4% a year for construction inflation, and we've seen considerably more.
Yeah, but a little bit more to what Trustee Kennedy was saying in terms of the debt service comes off and we do that big step up.
Sure. And Melinda is working with PMA, our financial advisor, to come up with scenarios of how we could layer in the debt for the police station that would allow us to continue to have the flexibility we were projecting. The bigger challenge and the bigger problem is the construction inflation, right? If we're going to hit our targets of 2.1 miles next year and then 2.7 miles each year after, the number we need to hit that is going to be a lot higher than we projected. And that's where we're going to have to find that revenue. And for President Plunkett, we do think we have opportunities there. We've had some very productive and positive conversations over the past couple of weeks with Wayfair and how sales tax is going to be captured in their point of sale. So we are confident we're going to see significant sales tax increases, but until those happen, and then they happen consistently over a period of time, it's difficult for us to project those to be a part of this program.
Whilst things are still on path, we know we have burdens coming in front of us. I'd prefer to wait and see how we want to address those, but I think they're great points, though.
No, it's okay. We're on path, but that path means we're stalled. Well, just so you understand, we're really, if you look at the graph that was in the budget documents, do you have a page 472 from the packet that you could pull up?
While you're saying that, can I add one more thing to your comment, Trustee Kennedy,
Sure.
which is, in addition to looking at the graph, I believe the board made a decision to really try to eliminate every serious road as a starting point. That was a goal. And if we don't do 15th Street, which I drove down today, I'm assuming all of you looked at it, it's very close to serious condition. So if we don't fund this, we are also not following our policy that we talked about, regardless of PCI, which was we wanted to get rid of and eliminate all serious roads. We made a commitment to that to the community. And so, and I mean, I think you all know where I feel about this. So, you know, our reserve balance grew by $3 million just from the time we decided not to do the additional road. So, you know, we don't have, as you know, we don't have a reserve plan. It's something I spoke at length about during the budget time. And so I'm concerned if we continue to not do roads and we continue to not, you know, we wanted to have a reserve plan when we met in the summer. You know, we can keep delaying it, but this road isn't going to go away and it's not going to get cheaper to do. Those are two known factors. It's going to get in worse condition and it's going to get more expensive. I mean, I think the staff would agree with that. I mean,
yes.
So
correct.
So I'm just, you know, and so we have to do it at some point, and it's going to cost more if we don't do it now, and it's going to get worse. The condition's going to get worse, and we have the money to do it.
I agree with all that, but there's always going to be another road. There's always going to be more.
That's why we've got to keep on path.
But we're. I mean, what's the projection? The mileage for this year? I think it's
2.95. I think. A little rapid for us.
Okay.
Our target is 2.1 this year.
Yeah, the projection for the base bid is 294, and then if we add 15th Street, it'd be 3.15.
Okay, so I mean, we are significantly exceeding our target of 2.1 miles, and we're exceeding the target that we set for ourselves in 2026 of 2.7. So, I mean, I just want to make that clear that, you know, we're there and we're way over where we wanted to be and where we wanted to be eventually. So, yes, I think there will always be competing things for our budget, and there will always be another road. I don't disagree with the arguments here, but I do want to make it clear that we have far exceeded what we set for ourselves as a goal to do our road program.
When you say far exceeded, just to Trustee Kennedy's point, can you clarify what you mean by far exceeded? Because I'm not following that logic. I mean, I'm not looking at miles. I'm looking at conditions of roads because that's what residents look at. So I'm trying to understand when you said we far exceeded what we're doing. What is that? You know, again, putting aside, you know, the percent. You know, our goal was based on PCI and the quality. You know, the index of each of the roads. So that's why I'm confused.
Well, I guess I meant on our mileage goals, where we set a mileage goal of 2.1, and then in a couple of years we set a mileage goal of 2.7, and this year we're going to do at a minimum 2.94. And we've gone from an average PCI of 57 to 67, and I believe that where we are right now at 67, base mile PCI is above where we estimated we were going to be.
No, that's where we were estimating. So when he gets the thing up, he can show you. That's exactly on target. But again, fair is a category, so I don't know where we are.
But we have no serious. We will have serious.
We will have a serious.
We'll have serious.
But I don't know if we said we will have zero serious or we will have zero serious in the future, if that makes sense.
It was at a future date that I can't remember. But, you know, the part of the goal was to make sure that anything that falls into serious immediately gets replaced. So that is what would happen, right? In 2025, it falls into serious and it gets replaced when that happens. Eric's trying to pull up the slide Trustee Kennedy had asked for to show the rating over time.
There, yeah. So you can see we're at 60. We were at 67 at the end of 23, and at the end of 24, we'll be at 67, which is not an improvement. And then in 2025, it'll still be 67. And then in 2026 will be a bare 68, so slightly better. So if you were to label those dots, it would go fair, 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 good, 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 good. So we don't even get to good until 2030.
I guess 2026 is assuming the increase in the, because we know.
This all assumes
That
the
assumes the increase.
This assumes
That
the increase
assumes
because
the
we
increase.
know the rate we're doing right now is not enough to get us where we need to be.
That's correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure, right. I mean,
That's
I know
correct.
you and I are on the same page
Yeah,
on this,
we are.
Trustee Kenny. I'm just clarifying for everybody else that
Thank you.
if we don't continue, we won't get to that.
Right. And our plan was to stall where we are,
Right.
Yes.
until
Yep.
that money freed
Yep.
up. So we are on target with our plan. We're doing more roads than we had anticipated with that plan. But we know the costs are increasing. There's no right or wrong answer here, right? It's just in terms of where how the board prefers to spend its money right now over the long term.
Just seems, I'm just concerned that when 2026 comes and we're starting the police station, we can't build half the police station. That's an all or nothing project. And so if we were relying on that drop off in debt service to keep us from raising taxes a lot, I think it's highly unlikely that we're going to have that in 2026.
I think it's difficult to project, right? We don't know where interest rates are. We're working on driving down the size and cost of the building.
Yeah.
Melinda's working on structuring the debt. I mean, there are a lot of levers to pull.
Yeah.
We do have the increase in construction costs that are going to challenge us
Right.
as well in terms of the road program.
And that's going to, and construction costs presumably for buildings are going to increase just like with the.
Yes, and those are factored into our
Right.
police station budget assumptions. But yeah.
Right. So I think that what the plan that we had was a good one at the time, but that's when we thought the police station was going to be $28,000.
Million.
Yeah, or whatever it was. It was very low. And that things have changed and things have changed and we've got a lot of money right now. And I'm getting to get really uncomfortable with a budget, a reserve fund that's nearly double what we set as our target.
I would agree with all of that, and I think, as Mr. Bremen said, it's not that there's a wrong answer here, but I think that this is a larger budget discussion. When we made the decision to increase our road funding years ago, this was a committee of the whole meeting, and we had maybe possibly a couple committee of the whole meetings, and we looked at everything, and I don't think we should be, making broad decisions on our road program at 10:30 at night when we're trying to approve a bid. Like, I think that this is a discussion that we need to have about the funding for our road program going forward. I think it's its own discussion, and I think it's a discussion that we also need to have when we talk about the other expenses that, are demanding. Inflation affects not only the road program, but a lot of things that we have to do as a village.
It sounds to me like we're all kind of saying the same thing, that we're all concerned about the road program and we're all concerned about how we allocate our reserves. President Plunkett, it sounds to me like you want to look at this from a holistic standpoint and make sure we're allocating proper resources to proper projects, which makes a lot of sense to me. It also makes a lot of sense to me for us to increase our road program. I've been a strong advocate of that since I've been on the board. I'm wondering how we make that happen. How do we have that conversation? Maybe how do we accelerate that conversation to decide if we want to over-allocate or increase our allocation and make those decisions outside of this one specific contract that we're trying to approve tonight?
I think I don't know, Mr. Bremen, I would assume it's a discussion, as part of our budget discussions, but maybe its own specific one on how we're going to be funding our roads going forward.
Yeah, we are going to need to revisit the road program funding strategy as we move into our CIP and our budget because of the cost increases, right? So we're planning on having, again, similar presentation and discussion what we've had on how the money available to us will allow us to move forward. where our shortfalls will be and then options to fill that. We know, or we believe we are going to have some options or revenues coming our way, but again, we can't bank on that until we realize that those are stable new revenues. So yes, come late summer, early fall, we'll have those detailed, in-depth discussions. And that'll also be, in conjunction with the finance committees, digging into our reserves and our policies and how we want to use some of those reserves for those larger capital programs.
I just want to add to that just a minute, if I can. So I guess I see it slightly differently, Trustee President Plunkett, just in the sense that I don't see this decision as totally about reevaluating our road program. I see this as what we've asked the staff to do, which is to go out and bid the work and bid additional roads so that we can decide. I think we're all in agreement that we've got some decisions that need to be made around priorities, capital projects, and how we're going to fund that. That's not what we're here to discuss today. We're here to discuss today whether we want to add one road to the program based on what we've done every year in terms of the contract that has come in. So I don't see it as I think we have to have the discussions. I think we have to have that discussion. To me, this is just about what we've done every year. We've gotten contracts. They've had additional work in them, and do we want to fund it? And I think I don't want us to get mixed up in the whole program. I think Trustee Kennedy's point was just to think about it is to talk about what our strategy was. And I am where Trustee Kennedy is, where I looked at these roads today. They're not in good condition, and I am concerned if a resident who lives on there and they know that we have $11 million extra in reserves than what we should have, that we can't afford right now to do their street. That's why I'm support the second alternative, because we can support it, and we do have a lot of decisions to be made. I'm pretty confident that given everything that's going on with Wayfair, our reserves are going to grow as well, at least in the short term. And I believe that our residents, we've made commitments to that, and that's why I'd like to fund this.
I understand that, but the only thing to counter that is it is different, because our policy has been if the bids come in lower, then we are going to fund it to get to where we budgeted. The base budget is $200,000 higher than we budgeted. To go an extra road is considerably higher, and so that hasn't been our policy to spend this extra money when we've gotten to our mileage base that we wanted to. I mean, it's a lot of money. I'm not saying that the money is not going to be less next year, but I think this totals 800 plus, $1.3 million out of reserves for our road program this year. That's a lot for the road program when we've already met and exceeded the mileage that we said we were going to go to. So, yes, okay.
So maybe we should just see where people are and just,
let's
see where people are. And we can debate this all.
We're 6.
Yeah, we're 6, so we have to come to a decision.
So,
okay,
but you might have what you need.
Dan, can you just move the slide to the options, the reserve impact options?
Right. I guess we're thank you. Because we're already at 1. We're done.
Yeah, I don't know.
I guess that's all.
And President, I'm sorry. I'm not. It's not my idea to wait till 10:30 at night to bring this up. We're stuck with what we have in terms of time. We have to make a decision tonight. We can't defer it to another time. We had matters that had to be dealt with first. This is all out of our control. It's not fun. I'm not doing this to annoy people. I'm not trying to make it difficult, and I'm not trying to avoid a larger discussion. I just think that, and I also don't think it's our policy not to spend additional money.
I agree.
So when you said it's our policy not to do it, I wouldn't call it a policy. We that's the practice that we've had in past years, but it's not a policy. And there's nothing. We have no policy that says we can't spend more on the road program if it seems like a good thing to do. There's no such policy that I know of.
And we funded a ambulance at $1 million because it was the right thing to do. So I agree with that. I'd be interested in what Trustee Leonard and Trustee Smith say, because if you guys are both at, just in the interest of time, if you guys are both at the orange, then we're discussion done.
Or for both blue.
Or blue, right.
Yeah,
I guess.
Say one more thing. Just one other quick little thing. I'm not really in favor of doing additional alleys just because we get more complaints. Roads are something that everybody in the village uses. Alleys are something that only the people that live on the alley use, allegedly. I mean, you're not supposed to be using them as thoroughfares. So this idea that we throw in extra alleys because we get more complaints, that does not thrill me. I'm not going to make a big deal out of it, but I don't like that idea.
We are further behind on our alley program because we halted the alley program. So we are further behind on the alley program than we are the road program.
And that's a good
objectively.
reason to do it. But doing it, and I agree with that, but doing it just because we get more complaints,
My perspective is, looking at this, we've got a bigger issue. I would go more towards the orange, stay within the budget perspective, and then discuss, knowing that inflation is playing a major role in the cost elements that as we look forward. You're always going to have a street that is in condition, and I don't live that far from this street, and I drive on this street quite a bit. And I can tell you, if we get to our budget planning cycle and we say, okay, now we're going to go after it, but we're going to take in these new factors of inflation, I think that's the type of discussion we have to have. To say that, okay, we got reserves, at our next meeting, we may have another major requirement to use those reserves. So, just to be responsible and taking the recommendation of staff, I'd rather stay at the orange at this moment. And then our discussion is, we know inflation is wherever it is, what we've seen, and maybe some projection. Let's figure out what we need to do in the next years. The fact that we have a good mileage trend, that's progress. That's progress.
Your comment about the recommendation of staff.
Mm-hmm.
I interpret that as their judgment call of what improvements should be made, and less so of a capital allocation decision. Is that fair? It's more of a roadway improvement than a capital allocation decision.
Well, I think we're prioritizing the extra alley over the extra road. So I do think it's a capital allocation based on the fact that we've fallen so far behind on alleys and we've caught up so much on roads. And I think the recommendation is more aligned with, trying to align with our budget. We had a plan coming into the year, and we're already over budget no matter what the decision point is. So from our perspective, that's where we aligned on the recommendation. Again, it's not wrong to do the road alternate in the east half of the alley. That's a very practical decision. But from a staff perspective, to recommend going $800,000 over budget at this point in the year, we're uncomfortable doing so without further discussion.
Okay, so that's really our purview.
Yes.
To address that. I'm a strong advocate of pumping reserves into our road and alley program, and I've been consistent on that. I have no problem doing 15th Street at this point, as it is so serious. But I also would like to sit down and look at that curve and see how every $500,000 that we put into the program affects the curve on a bigger picture standpoint. So I would have no problem supporting the higher number today, but also would want to talk about how we get that curve shifted up and how we do that more quickly. And I can't think of many higher priorities I would have for our excess funds, our reserve funds, excuse me.
Okay, so now we really need Trustee Jaya here.
So we flip a coin, right? If we're
Yeah. Okay. Did Trustee Shepherd, do you have anything you want to add here?
No, I mean, I think Mr. Bayman had it right when he said neither is wrong. I think the arguments are sound on both sides. I was for the orange, but eventually we're going to spend the money. I'm not going to go. I don't think it's a terrible idea to do the blue, so I'm fine doing that. Just to, we're going to do these roads, so we have to make a decision. So That's fine by me.
Okay, so it looks like we're gonna do that.
Yeah.
Okay. That's where we came out. So I think on last week's, we don't need to do anything, right? We don't, correct?
Right, that's,
No
that
action.
was all included. in
That was
last
included.
week's,
So we just have the motion on, it's been,
But do we have to amend the ordinance as drafted to take into account that double alley?
That's the motion, because
That is
staff's
the motion. It is the
recommendation was to
motion.
include the
Got
half
it.
for the double alley.
So it's already in there?
Yeah, we're good to vote.
Okay.
A yes vote is essentially voting for the blue count, row.
right, okay, so it's been moved and seconded. So, Mr. Hallgren, could you please call the roll?
Trustee Dodd.
Aye.
Trustee Shepard.
Aye.
Trustee Smith.
Nay.
Trustee Leonard.
Aye.
Trustee Kennedy.
Aye.
And President Plunkett.
Aye. Okay. Trustee Dodd, I'm going back to you for Land Use Committee.
All items were on consent.
Okay, and Judiciary Committee, Trustee Leonard.
All items on consent.
Okay, we have no reports from special committees, no new business. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Trustee Smith, a second?
Second.
Trustee Kennedy, all those in favor?
Aye.
Adjourned.